Chapter 1484. Duque's words definitely hit the nail on the head. In the original version of history, the Allied forces attacked the Darkness Temple after defeating Vashj and Kale, that's Illidari, and the others, who thought that they had lost their master, chose to stand on Illidan's side and fight the Allied forces to the death. However, Kale, that's the master that they had sworn loyalty to, was standing here, and they had only turned to Illidan because they couldn't resist the demon addiction. With the amnesty of Duque, the number one person in the alliance, it would be a lie if they didn't feel relieved. Kale, that's also let out a long sigh of relief. Duque, thank you. Kaisi in this life was good at everything, except that he was too soft-hearted. Duque waved his hand, and Kaisi immediately understood. His private mount, Phoenix, immediately jumped out, chirped happily, and rushed straight up with Kaisi on its back. On the other side, the soul box seemed to have completed its transformation. It had entered the second stage, the source of desire. Duque looked around and said, "Thrall, Willan, I'll leave this to you." Thrall had already stood up, and his face was very dark. If the soul box was just an enemy that could be fought or not fought before, it had now become a target that Thrall and the entire horde had to defeat. Whether it was out of brotherly love or the principle of the shaman doctrine of souls returning to the earth, Thrall and the horde couldn't let Orgrim's soul suffer in the soul box. Thrall also realized that such a powerful Illidan wasn't something that the horde could deal with. Focusing on dealing with the soul box was what the horde could do now. Thrall nodded heavily in response to Duque's words. Duque, who was in Karazhan, peeked at the situation on the other side. The shadow of Akama was easy to deal with. Now, Varian was leading the Alliance's horde to fight the six-armed demon matriarch, Shiraz. It could be said that the battles in all parts of the Darkness Temple were at a stalemate. In the temple, Duque raised his hand, and a winged figure suddenly appeared. She was Shatura, the head of the Zerg in the Outland. Duque lifted his chin at the four of them and waved the things in his hand. They were a few bottles of high-purity sun well water. This scene caused the breathing of the four people to quicken. While dark energy could temporarily alleviate the demon addiction, but how could the dark energy that was converted from the souls of the earth be as pure and efficient as the water from the sun well? Duque smiled, "My promise is valid. As long as you don't help each other before we decide who's the winner between us and Illidan. The Alliance will accept you again, and they will not hold it against you for defecting to Illidan. Remember, Illidan's last name is Storm Rage. Blood brothers, broken bones connected tendons." Back then, Illidan had courted death in front of the Night Elves and deserved to be executed. But in the end, Malfurion still used his influence to sentence Illidan to life imprisonment. Just because Illidan was Malfurion's brother and Tyron's unlucky childhood friend, Duque could not kill Illidan. Moreover, as a transmigrator, Duque knew that Illidan's heart was in the enemy camp, and it was very likely that he was the legendary son of light and darkness. After intimidating the four people for a while, the four people silently took a few steps back and stood a certain distance away from Shachula. Duque nodded, and then he flashed to the top of the temple. Blink could not flash into the air, but the floors of the temple were the best stepping stones. When Duque arrived at the highest floor, he was shocked to find that Illidan was King unparalleled. The twin blades of Azzinoth, the symbol of the ugly original sin, were spewing the flames of hell, and the green dark energy was dazzling. This was clearly more than two. On the other hand, on Duque's side, after watching for a few seconds, Duque only had one sentence to say: "What a shame, let's leave the group." Illidan was unparalleled, and Duque's side had 3.5 demigods, and they were actually beaten like dogs. Illidan's high agility and speed was one reason, but more importantly, the four of them seriously lacked coordination. The attack speed of the Sword Sovereign's Kiraji Emperor sword was too slow. This was not a game where one would forcefully lose HP. Originally, the Sword Sovereign's swordsmanship was barely acceptable, but in front of a fierce person like Illidan, it was nothing. Thinking about it, Queen Sylvan could dodge in front of him, so naturally, Illidan could too. After discovering that the twin emperors had the same HP, Illidan did not even bother with the demon sovereign. After all, Illidan was better at swordsmanship than his magic. And although the demon sovereign was proficient in all types of magic, the power of each type of magic attack was limited, and Illidan directly used shadow magic to fight him. On the other hand, Kale, that's used the sword sovereign's magic immunity to fiercely throw fireballs, almost turning half of the platform into a sea of fire. In the sky were rolling dark clouds, and on the ground was a sea of fire that seemed to burn to the horizon. It was nice to watch, but it was useless. As long as he was not a demigod, the power of Kai Z's elemental magic could not improve in quality. The gap between mortals and gods was not so easy to bridge. Moreover, the guys in the Burning Legion were really not afraid of fire. Dark energy itself was one of the most terrifying flames in the world. After Illidan took 2 tentative pyroblast from Kai Z, he smiled contemptuously and ignored Kai Z. When a mage reached Breaking Dawn, they already had many life-saving skills. They could not confine a Breaking Dawn mage's power source in the elemental domain, and it would take a long time to chase a Breaking Dawn. So Illidan played the elimination game with Kai Z. Being hated by the enemy was also a kind of honor. But being ignored by the enemy was a shame. At least Kale, that's had experienced so many ups and downs, and his mentality was more mature and steady. He did not really rush to play melee mage with Illidan head-on, and turn to support Vashj. This was because Vashj, who was more comprehensive, was the one who was the real threat to Illidan. Her nature element thunder magic not only covered a wide range, but the electric shock also had paralysis and deceleration effects. This was definitely a big threat to Illidan, who relied on agility. And Vashj's superb archery skills, sound arrows, silent arrows, invisible arrows, curved trajectory, straight-line explosive shots, attacks that were calculated with precise shooting trajectories would sometimes suddenly form a situation similar to a fatal blow. Several times she almost hit Illidan's vital points, and his scalp went numb on the spot. Almost every time, he narrowly dodged it. Illidan could be considered ruthless. What Duque saw when he came up was Illidan directly summoning a large group of shadlings to entangle the other 3 powerhouses, and taking the opportunity to attack Vashj. It was true that Vashj had 6 arms, and after 10,000 years of training, her 6 arms were extremely coordinated. 2 long swords, 2 daggers, and a staff danced up and down, almost airtight. Even with Illidan's crazy attacks, Vashj was not at a disadvantage in melee combat. Vashj was at a disadvantage because of Illidan's dark energy. Illidan's entire body turned into a green sun, brutally burning everything within 10 meters of his body. Chapter 1485. Sacrifice. By burning one's own mana, it burns everything around it regardless of friend or foe. Combined with mana burn, it is the nemesis of all spellcasters. Coupled with the high dodge rate brought by high agility, Illidan relied on this combo to dominate the world 10,000 years ago when he was still a moon guard and fought against the Burning Legion in the Ancient War. No one knew how many demons stronger than Illidan died because of this. Even his twin blades of Azeroth were taken back like this. Vashj's 6-armed combat style could be said to be no weaker than any melee combatant, but unfortunately, she was facing Illidan. Vashj's net of daggers and swords was rarely able to hit Illidan, and even if it did, it would be blocked by the 2 swords. On the other hand, Vashj was constantly being burned by sacrifice, mana burn, shadow barrage, soul absorption, and other shadow attribute attacks. Even if Vashj had a demigod body, this was still not the way to go. The Sword King killed the shadow demon and rushed over to help. His movements were slower, and it looked like he was more of a hindrance. If Kai Z hadn't given Vashj an effect similar to Blazing Haste, which greatly increased Vashj's movement speed for a short period of time, perhaps Vashj's situation would be even worse. Traitor! You shall die here. Illidan opened his big mouth with shark teeth and grinned. Traitor! Ha! Do you remember what I said to you when I first joined you? Since you are so strong, before a stronger guy appears, I will serve you. Now that my master has returned, I will naturally return to serve my master. By the way, during the ancient war 10,000 years ago, I offered my loyalty to my master, Mark Dooku, who is now Duke Marcus, in the palace of Azhara. Vashti said with a smile. There was a fundamental difference between serving and loyalty. When Illidan took Vashti as his subordinate, he didn't think so much. With the idea of, I should be the best in the world, he never thought that Vashti would have a master. Vashti didn't mention Tyrande at all, but how could Illidan not think of the mess between Duke and Tyrande in Azhara? This made Illidan even angrier. On this side, Vashti was clearly at a disadvantage, but her face was still fearless. Her 6 hands continuously launched counterattacks, and from time to time, she would use thunder magic to shock Illidan. Her attitude of absolute reliance made Illidan even more angry. Ha! Are you still waiting for your master to save you? No chance. He's a coward who doesn't dare to run out of his wizard tower. Illidan roared, his voice almost breaking Vashti's eardrums. Illidan's shout made the 3.5 demigods present a little angry, but also a little helpless. Illidan had already used his tyrannical strength to show his dominance as a leader, but what about their boss? Because he was restrained by Kill Jaden, he could not come to Draenor personally. In the beginning, they had hoped to defeat Illidan to prove themselves, but after a short period of failure, their mentality had changed subtly. King against king, general against general. This idea of Azeroth, which had been an iron law since ancient times, began to spread uncontrollably in their minds. Why can't our boss, Duque, appear? In fact, it was not just them. There was actually a very, very faintly discernible will secretly scanning here every once in a while. At this moment, a leisurely and absolutely confident voice sounded. Illidan. You think too highly of yourself if you want my main body to act. However, it's not impossible to let you see the mighty power of a demigod of the weave. Duque. The one who spoke was the puppet, Mark Dooku, who had come to the platform and was directly controlled by Duque. In Karazhan, Tyrande suddenly hugged the rising Duque. She was so nervous that tears could clearly be seen at the corner of her eyes. No. You can't go directly. Kill Jaden is watching you. As soon as your soul enters Draenor, you'll fall into his trap. Duque smiled gently and gently stroked Tyrande's hair. You're not a wizard, so you don't understand. In fact, I don't necessarily have to personally participate in order for an empty puppet to have demigod-level combat power. Behind the humanoid puppet, a colorful portal opened up. An existence with extremely strong elemental fluctuations stepped out of the portal and came in front of Illidan, Vashti, and the other powerhouses. However, his appearance caused all the powerhouses to be dumbfounded. The existence in front of them with a translucent soul was definitely not Duque. However, the powerhouses on Duque's side were not unfamiliar with the newcomer. Khadgar? Yes. The person who had come was the great director of the Weave, the originally incomparably powerful great wizard of 3 virtues, Khadgar. The current Khadgar was just a standard elemental creature. His appearance made Kale, that's instantly understand what Duque was doing. The magic circuit was rooted in the soul, and it was a magic system that produced and controlled magic power. To let an empty soul have powerful magic power, not only did it need a tough and incomparably compatible body, but it also needed the soul of a powerful wizard. Duque could not put in his soul, but it did not mean that he could not use other souls. As soon as Khadgar appeared, he took large strides and directly turned his entire elemental body illusory, entering Mark Dooku's body. Then, Khadgar, opened his arms and shouted to the sky, I, Khadgar, open my soul to my lord. The will of my lord is my will. With a burst of purplish-blue arcane light shining in front of everyone, in less than half a second, the Duque that appeared in front of everyone became real. In just an instant, whether it was the phoenix flames that spread almost the entire platform or the evil sacrificial fire that burned everything within a 10-meter radius with Illidan as the center, all disappeared without a trace. The scenery in their field of vision did not change, but in the perception of the powerhouses, what appeared in front of them was an extremely quiet elemental world. The violent fire elemental was as still as water, the surging frost elemental was resting quietly, and the reverberating natural elemental elements circulated themselves according to this world's unchanging rhythm for thousands of years. All the elemental elements seemed so quiet and serene. No one could imagine that just a moment ago, there was a magic war that involved the divine realm. Only the top magic powerhouses could feel the sea of magic. 12 bright moons lit up in the void. These moons were actually the 12 nodes of the weave. They calmly provided elemental power from the entire world of Draenor to the existence at the center of the nodes. Duque opened his eyes, and his pupils were clear. Come. Illidan. Chapter 1486. It was hard to describe what this so-called Duque in front of him was. An empty shell constructed with magic as the core, the soul of a super mage who was supposed to carry the destiny of history but became an elemental life form, and the control of a real demigod behind the scenes. Illidan looked at this Duque with mixed feelings. He felt like he was being fooled, but he couldn't tell what Duque had fooled him about. As for where Jaden had gone, Illidan had a vague guess. What Duke was doing now was fulfilling his duty to protect Azeroth. He had done it to the best of his ability. It was just that no one thought that there would be such an operation. Duque raised his left hand horizontally and gently grasped. A very ordinary brownish-red wooden staff suddenly appeared in his left hand's palm. It had a drumstick-shaped head and a simple belt. Just by looking at its appearance, no one would associate this quaint-looking staff with the legendary Azeroth's strongest staff. But when 3 ethereal crows appeared on the head of the staff and cawed, Illidan felt as if his fate had been disrupted by these crows. Duque spoke. His voice was low and full of a sense of history. This is, Atish, the legendary staff of the Guardian. The former Guardian of Azeroth, Medivh, self-destructed this artifact staff as the price to send Sardra's soul into the bottomless abyss. After that, I spent 23 years and finally collected all 42 pieces of it from the hands of Kel, Thuzad and Si Thun, and rebuilt this staff. Duque opened his right hand and pulled out another weapon from the void. When he pulled out his wrist from the void, circles of golden ripples appeared in midair. What he took out was a glittering holy sword. The sword was extremely slender, and the blade was less than a finger's width. The body of the sword was constantly twisting upwards, like a spiral cone. The hilt of the sword seemed to have added a pair of shining angel wings for the sake of beauty. Compared to the seemingly ancient staff in Duque's left hand, the blade of this holy sword was as clean as new, as if it had just been quenched and forged in a blacksmith's shop. But when Illidan saw it, he immediately trembled. It wasn't that the sword was too new, but that the holy aura that bloomed from it was so strong that not even the slightest bit of filth could accumulate on it. This holy sword obviously represented absolute purification. Duque's voice became lower and lower, but in Illidan's ears, every word was shocking. It was thought-provoking. This sword originated from Quell Zalam, an unnamed product after the original Great Sage sword was split. It used to have an unreliable name. However, after I used it to kill the Demon King Sardras, the Lich King Zul, the Flame Lord Ragnaros, the Black Dragon Prince Nefarian, the Defiler Archimond, and the ancient god Si Thun. I prefer to call it Duke Marcus Demon Slayer. Every time Duque said a name, he took a step forward. Each step was heavier and more shocking than the last. The holy sword did not kill the nameless. It was precisely because every name that fell on this holy sword once represented an earth-shattering feat that the weight of the sword was unimaginably heavy. For a moment, Illidan couldn't control himself and even forgot to breathe. These names, small ones were famous, big ones resounded throughout the universe. Compared to them, who was Illidan? Illidan more or less knew about Duque's achievements, but when Duque carefully listed them, he clearly felt the pressure in his heart was as heavy as a mountain. Crack. That was the sound of Illidan gritting his sharp teeth hard. He didn't know when, but the tip of his left foot that was originally stepping forward moved back by a centimeter. He noticed this at once. This discovery made him ashamed on the spot. Because this proved that he was afraid. In front of Duque, all his efforts seemed to be in vain, and all his achievements seemed to be child's play. When Duque blew up the twisting nether in the War of the Ancients, he was an immature spy. When Duque almost destroyed all the Burning Legion leaders, he was still Jaden's lackey. Without comparison, there would be no harm. Duque's glory was a reflection of his failure. Illidan's muscles swelled to the extreme, and the two blades in his hands trembled because he was clenching them too tightly. Illidan was at a loss. At this moment in Karazhan, Jaina rubbed her eyebrows. Hey! Duque, although you've beaten up so many powerful big guys, I remember that when you stabbed the Mediv possessed by Sargeras to death, you didn't have this holy sword, right? Duque righteously spouted nonsense. When it comes to aura, as long as you can overwhelm the opponent, it's a success. When it comes to battle results, it doesn't matter if I believe it or not, as long as the opponent believes it and is terrified, then everything is fine. Tyrande, who had been in a state of anxiety, slapped her forehead. Am I stupid to be so worried about you and Illidan? A little. Before Duque could finish, he was glared at by Aurelia, and Duque decisively swallowed the second half of his sarcastic words. In fact, was it wrong for Duque to use his aura to suppress others? Absolutely not. If he could overwhelm the opponent with his aura before the battle, it would shake the opponent's confidence. In a battle like this where the difference in levels was not too far apart, it was the best opportunity. Duque's words were 70% true and 30% false. He was bluffing that Illidan was not well informed. The miserable Illidan had been imprisoned for 10,000 years, and not long after he was released, he jumped ship to the Burning Legion. Then, he was forced by Jaden to run to Northrend to fight against Arthas. At this point in time, it was after Duque led the allied army to kill Archimonde. Many things, even if Jaden kept his mouth shut, there would always be talkative demons who knew about Duque's crazy battle results. Under the spread of false information, Duque's battle results had long been exaggerated many times over. There were two things that were absolutely certain. Duque had personally killed Sargeras and Archimonde. Regardless of whether these two could be resurrected in the future, at least everyone knew that Duque had beaten the Burning Legion until only Jaden was left out of the three. Because of this, Illidan was so afraid of Duque. The wind from the Black Temple blew over, but it was all swept away by the elements around Duque's body that were so dense that they were almost solid. The corner of Duque's mouth rose. He knew that the time had come. Blindly exerting fear would instead arouse Illidan's blood. It was time to set the pace again. Ah! Oh yes, I forgot to tell you. After that kid Arthas became a Death Knight, he saw me twice. One time, he broke an arm, and the other time, he was cut in half. I heard that you were beaten up badly by that kid. I hope you don't disappoint me too much. If you're not even as good as him. Chapter 1487. Duque's words were heard by the girls watching in Karazhan, and Jaina rolled her eyes. Although Duke's words didn't explicitly state that he was the culprit behind both of Arthas' deaths, it was clear that he was leading Arthas in that direction. Tyrande was surprised at first, and then smiled bitterly. She rested her chin on one hand and rubbed her eyebrows with the other, thinking, Illidan is a veteran who has lived for more than 10,000 years. Unfortunately, in terms of strategy and tactics, he will not be able to catch up to Duque even if he practiced for another 10,000 years. Aurelia shrugged. She knew, Duque was good at borrowing power and accumulating his own advantages. There was no way to interrupt Duque at the beginning, and like a rolling snowball, Duque became the behemoth he was now. Who would have thought that at the beginning, Duque was just a little guy with a bit of strange ability. Now, he was almost the hope of the entire Azeroth. When Duque mentioned Arthas, it was like slapping Illidan in the face. His face, which had turned dark and green because of his dark powers, became very interesting. Is that all you can do? Illidan said fiercely. Oh. Duque laughed. He raised his left hand that was holding the staff and swung it horizontally, his palm slightly upward, and hooked his index finger at Illidan. Then come, it's just you and me. My men will not attack you. The twin emperors, Kai Z, and Vashti all stepped back, giving enough space for the two bosses to fight. Illidan's eyelids twitched. To be honest, if Duque came with his luxurious lineup, he would really have a headache. Just now, he could beat these four guys because they lacked coordination, and the key was that they lacked a true core. Once Duque appeared, then these four guys would undoubtedly all follow Duque's lead. The combat power of a demigod could be fully released. Just dealing with Duque alone was naturally more ideal in terms of tactics. Unfortunately, knowing that his opponent was just a puppet, Illidan had a feeling that he would lose regardless of whether he won or not. Indeed, Duque's main body could not descend, but it did not mean that Duque could not create a new puppet mage. Illidan really did not understand what kind of existence the demigod of the weave was. Illidan shook his head and forced the distracting thoughts out of his mind. No matter what the result was, he could only fight. Otherwise, his foundation would be completely destroyed. Humph. With a cold snort, Illidan's huge body suddenly disappeared. He did not use the demonic spells that he was very familiar with. The other party was obviously an existence that had reached the pinnacle of elemental mastery. Blindly bombarding him with magic might not be able to gain the upper hand. Illidan brandished Azanatha's dual blades and attacked. There were no feints, no probing, only absolute speed. It was so fast that the naked eye could not catch it. It was unimaginably fast. It reminded people of the countless times in the ancient war when Illidan charged past quickly, every demonic movement was frozen, and then purplish-blue blood sprayed out from the vital points. When Duque realized that Illidan had gone behind him and was about to slash him from behind, there was a moment when Duque thought that he was in trouble. Illidan was fast, but the reaction of the system elf was even faster. It was completely beyond the limits of what Duque could react to. The system had already activated its own defense. Woo! The elements that were extremely calm a moment ago seemed to be stretched in the space according to Duque's will. The terrifying cold light that suddenly shot out reminded every powerhouse of a weapon, and they felt a bone-chilling coldness from their bones straight to their heart. Illidan instantly judged that if he rushed in without a care, the chill would climb up his body in the next moment, and then instantly freeze, and then form a thick layer of ice, sealing his movements. Element, frost. Illidan's expression suddenly changed, and his body that had been greatly strengthened by his dark powers made an unimaginable move. In the blink of an eye, his huge body that was charging forward suddenly did a backflip. His feet, which had turned into hooves due to his dark powers, kicked the air, and with the help of the two balls of dark flames that appeared out of thin air, he completely changed his direction and somersaulted 3 times in the direction of where he came from, and flew backward. He used too much force, and when he retreated, his hooves plowed 2 fist-deep marks on the solid floor of the temple. It was only then that Duque slowly turned his body, and turned his head to look at Illidan, with a winner's mocking smile on his face. Ha! Pretty fast reflexes. Illidan's face alternated between green and red. Compared to Duque's methods, his attack just now was like a clown. This was like a duel between 2 people. One of them used a sword dance to create 81 sword flowers, and it looked very beautiful, but who knew that he would be defeated by the other in one move? It was really embarrassing to the Twisted Nether. While the girls in Karazhan were amazed, only Jaina was a little puzzled. Why do I feel like you were the one who didn't react just now? Smack! Duke's slap landed on Jaina's perky buttocks, causing Jaina to yelp in shock. She covered her buttocks and jumped up shyly. Who asked you to talk? Believe it or not, I'll go wow you later. Of course, outsiders would not know that Duque really didn't react, and only felt that his boss's level was off the charts. Gas, who was standing 50 meters away, had her beautiful eyes flashing. Her flushed face made people wonder if she had some crooked thoughts in her mind just now, and she was having a good time. On the other side, just a test had made Illidan's heart sink. He only felt that Duke Marcus had defeated so many peerless masters, and he really lived up to his name. Tisk! Illidan spat. He was not willing to accept it. He absolutely did not believe that a demigod who had not even descended could have such terrifying strength. This puppet wearing the skin of Duke Marcus, with an incompatible soul as its core, must have some weakness. Illidan moved again, this time faster. He ran around Duque, maintaining a distance of at least 10 meters. His speed was so fast that he actually left a blurry shadow on the outer ring. No one could sense his specific location, only the heavy tread of the demon's hooves on the stone floor could be heard. Sacrifice. Mana burn. The combo that had never failed before was used again. But it was useless. A group of elements rose up in front of Duque's left, looking like a mushroom cloud that had shrunk to the size of a palm. It was obvious that the elements there had all been stimulated and exploded out of control. However, this group of elements was at least 2 meters away from Duque. The smile on the corner of Duque's mouth became clearer. Chapter 1488. Illidan's mana burn sounded very powerful. With a small amount of magic power, he could cause chaos in the opponent's magic circuit and cause damage. In fact, this was a high-level upgraded version of the mage's mana seal. The difference between the two was that the mana seal would only cause temporary chaos in the opponent's magic and prevent them from casting spells. On the other hand, mana burn would inject more chaotic magic power into the opponent's body, focusing on causing all the magic power in the opponent's circuit to overload, or even cause the circuit to explode, destroying the opponent's magic storage and damaging the opponent's circuit. Since Duque had been plotting against Illidan for so long, how could he not guard against Illidan's move? Even if Illidan had long been in his demon form and seemed to have forgotten his signature skill, Duque would never forget it. Moreover, Vashj and the others had already gone up to test the waters. According to the results, Duque was even more certain. Therefore, in the surrounding void, Duque had already set up a series of magic loops similar to magic circuits. On the surface, these loops were an extension of his personal magic circuit. They were tactile and control lines, but in fact, they were not directly related to the magic circuit he had now. They were purely used to prevent Illidan's mana burn. Until now, the feeling of failure was displayed so clearly in front of the arrogant Illidan for the first time. In every battle he fought in his life, he could calmly control the life and death of others. But at this moment, he finally understood that when his best attack method was mercilessly suppressed, the weaker party was as weak as a drowning person who was bound by the goddess of fate and then mercilessly thrown into the sea to wait to drown. That was the deepest sorrow. The move that he was most proud of since his debut had been completely destroyed, and his desire and confidence for victory had been mercilessly trampled. His heart finally showed signs of being unable to bear it. Before, he thought that as a new demigod, Duque often relied on the help of strong people to achieve such achievements. In terms of strength and status, he was only on the same level as him. If that was the case, of course, he could use all kinds of methods to give Duque a show of strength. But now, not only did he realize that he had failed to put on a show of strength, but he had also made a grave mistake. That wasn't some newly ascended demigod at all, nor was it a lucky person who had forcefully stepped into the divine territory by relying on his powerful physical body or some other special trait. Instead, it was a terrifying existence who had already grasped the core meaning of the divine territory. No, once Duque was able to become one with heaven and earth, he would be able to use the power of the planet endlessly. Even if the amount of power Duque could use was limited, he would still be an absolute existence that was about to step into the realm of true gods. Duque gently propped Atish on the ground and smiled, "Yo, Illidan. If you have any other moves, hurry up and use them. I'm looking forward to the power you'll gain after joining Kill Jaden." Next would be Dark Bullet Screen, Soul Extraction, Fire Explosion, or Flame of Pain. Duque counted Illidan's moves one by one. Every time he counted one, Illidan's face darkened. If his trump card was known by the enemy, how could it still be called a trump card? He didn't know when, but the psychological pressure that Duque put on him was getting bigger and bigger. Duque took 3 steps towards Illidan. "Illidan, although I'm not in a hurry, I advise you to move faster. Otherwise, as the commander of the Alliance, sometimes it's not good for me to fight with the people below me." Fight for what? Of course, it was to kill. Duque gently raised his left hand, and at this moment, the battle scenes throughout the Black Temple were unreservedly displayed in front of Illidan. On the periphery, the Alliance and Horde soldiers rushed in and swept away the resisting demons step by step in a disciplined manner. The cannons first fired a round of bombardment, then the grenadiers threw all kinds of holy water bombs. Even if they couldn't kill them, they would still cripple them. Then, the archers suppressed them, and finally, the infantry advanced. On the Horde side, it was simple and violent. Often, it was a direct, Loktar, ogre, charge. If they couldn't kill the enemy, they would consider it their loss. Anyway, outside the front line, the reinforcements and the injured soldiers formed two parallel lines that did not intersect. They were busy and orderly. The demons and fell orcs that Illidan had set up in the temple retreated step by step. On the Alliance's side, Mother Sharas had been beaten like a dog by William and his men. Her arrogant and frivolous expression could no longer be seen on her face. 2 of her 6 arms had been chopped off by William, and her body was riddled with wounds. All that was left was the question of how long she could last. On the front line of the Horde, Willan and Thrall worked together to attack the Soul Box. It was obvious that they had reached the end stage. Illidan took one look and knew that the Soul Box would not last much longer. Of course, what was even more infuriating was that in the video, he saw Illidan and the other 4 members of the Alliance doing nothing. That's right, on the surface, Duque seemed to be thinking for the 4 of them. But in reality, would he allow the 4 of them to join Illidan again? After all, they were 4 people who had stepped into the realm of heroes. He would not let Illidan take advantage of them again. Duque used this method to secretly take advantage of the 4 of them. And the last scene made Illidan's face as dark as ink. This was because he saw Akama, whose soul had been extracted by him to guard the temple in the form of the shadow of Akama, sneak into the most secret prison of the temple and release the guy that he absolutely did not want to see again, Maev Shadowsong. Only the most powerful will could allow people to track evil and enter the dark abyss without being tempted by the power of demons. This was the will of Maev Shadowsong. Before the War of the Ancients, Maev Shadowsong was a high-ranking priestess of the Night Elves. For someone who did not have noble blood, this was a very impressive achievement. However, the terror and chaos brought about by the invasion of the Burning Legion made her deeply feel that only quick and decisive action was the only way to solve the problem. When the traitor Illidan was not sentenced to death, but was instead sentenced to life imprisonment, she could not contain her anger. However, she still offered to be Illidan's guardian until the day he died. She also gathered other priestesses to assist her and established the Watchers, an organization dedicated to defending the Night Elves from evil. After Illidan escaped from prison, Watchers Shadowsong embarked on a journey to hunt him down. In the process, many Watchers died, but her will never wavered. Her firm belief in order and justice carried her through many difficulties, including the time when she was captured and imprisoned by Illidan. Now that Maev Shadowsong was released, it was obvious that according to her personality, the first thing she would do was to find trouble with Illidan. Illidan suddenly felt annoyed. He really did not know what would happen if he fell into Maev's hands. But it would definitely be an ending that had nothing to do with happiness or stability. Illidan suddenly had an ominous feeling that he would fail. Chapter 1489. Illidan had experienced too many failures. If it weren't for his stubborn personality, his repeated defeats, and his unyielding character, most people would have collapsed long ago. Even Duque would have committed suicide after being locked in a small black room for a month, let alone being locked in a small black room for 10,000 years. In terms of willpower, even if he wasn't weak, it wasn't his strong point. An egg had a crazy amount of confidence, and had survived time and time again. But so what? Could it stop him from failing again? Duque saw Illidan's expression and knew that his psychological attack had worked again. Although he could not understand the relationship between Maev Shadowsong and Illidan, it was indisputable that Illidan did not kill Maev immediately after capturing her. Although Maev had tortured Illidan many times in the past 10,000 years, it was an indisputable fact that Illidan did not kill her immediately after capturing her. Was it the other way around, or was it the other way around? Or should he leave her a way out in the future? Or should he leave her alone in the future? Or maybe it was all three. Duque didn't know. Anyway, Duque only knew that Maeve was very strong. If she wasn't strong, she definitely wouldn't have been able to chase Illidan like a rabbit. If Duque wasn't wrong, Maeve's shadow song should have some kind of demigod body, and it was similar to Illidan's. Otherwise, Illidan wouldn't have needed to team up with a group of subordinates to capture Maeve. When Tyrande, who was in Karazhan, saw this scene, she felt as if she could already see the ending. Duke was like the most skilled hunter, forcing the beast, Illidan, step by step, into the trap that he had prepared beforehand. This was not only the suppression of the general trend, but it was also a chain of nooses. Hey! Duque, why do I feel like you're the main antagonist this time? Jaina very cleverly pointed out this point. Slap. Last time, he slapped the left side, this time it was the right side. Woo woo. Jaina cried. She had been a little princess since she was young, and when she grew up, she became a queen. Other than Duque, the bastard master who pushed his disciple, who else would dare to slap her but? Do I need you to speak out of turn? On the platform of the Black Temple, Illidan was obviously affected. He moved again, and this time, he actually made a mirror image similar to the Sword Saint's. At this moment, there were a total of 4 Illidans in 4 different directions, pacing in an invisible circle. Huh! Duque let out a breath of turbid air. He had never seen Illidan use this move before. However, if all of Illidan's moves were the same as in the game, then it would be too boring. Even though he was the pharaoh back then, he had no interest in such things. However, as the leader of the team, he had a wealth of experience from farming Illidan countless times. Coupled with the accurate 3D simulation of Illidan by the system elf, it was to the point where Illidan knew that he was pooping when he limped. Duke Marcus, repent for provoking me again and again. Sorry, as a demigod, I really don't know who to repent to. Duque had a strange smile on his face. In the next second, Illidan knew why. Besides, I know this move of yours too. True mirror image. Opposite to the 4 Illidans, 4 identical Duques suddenly appeared out of thin air. Their height, figure, clothing, appearance, and even their expressions and the magic contained within were all the same. If it wasn't for Duque deliberately leaving a loophole, even people like Vashti probably wouldn't be able to tell who was who. Duque let the 4 new mirror images hold different weapons. These magic weapons of different styles came from the Molten Core, Blackwing's Nest, Naxxramas, and the Temple of Ankh-Kiraj. They were a powerful bonus to the mirror image's spellcasting ability, and also a great proof of Duque's success in conquering the various forbidden lands. As his strength increased, these weapons and equipment were no longer useful to Duque, but they were all soul-bound. It was a waste to turn them into enchantment materials. Anyway, there were plenty of places, so he might as well keep them as souvenirs. Now that he used them, it was another slap in the face for Illidan. Look! I'm even holding the real thing in my doppelgangers. Do you have the ability to make 3 pairs of twin blades of Azzinoth? Fortunately, Illidan didn't have his eyes anymore, otherwise, wouldn't his eyeballs have popped out this time? Behind the black cloth covering his eyes, a ghostly green light flashed non-stop. It was obvious that Illidan was very angry. Calm down. Calm down. I must calm down. Although he knew that Duque was provoking him, looking at Duque's irritating face and thinking that this was the guy who had taken over his beloved Tyrande, Illidan couldn't keep calm at all. Ha! For loud shouts exploded in 4 directions at the same time. In the next second, all 4 Illidans disappeared. Mirror Doppelganger was a skill that he had learned from a fell orc sword saint, and it took him a long time to master. This skill had a very high requirement for talent, and it also required the coordination of the brain and the ability to command. He really didn't believe that a weak mage who didn't use all 4 limbs could have that kind of reaction and face attacks from 4 directions at the same time. Actually, Duque really didn't have that. However, Illidan knew too little about Duque. From the beginning, Duque was famous for his so-called metamagic ability, multicast. Not to mention 4, with the help of the system elf, Duque could even make 100 doppelgangers with different movements and independent reactions. However, it would be difficult to maintain the combat power of the doppelgangers, and it would be an unnecessary burden to the Outland Weave. So there were only 4, and it looked like one-on-one. In reality, there was a fundamental difference. Duque used 4 doppelgangers to deal with Illidan. Illidan was playing 1+3 with his main body and 3 doppelgangers. In the other 3 directions, one of Duque used an icicle to resist the impact of an Illidan, another used Dragon's Breath to resist the shadow impact of Eggy's doppelganger, and there was a pair of Ice Ring and Ice Spear to lock Eggy's doppelganger, and a Throwing Blade. In the main direction of Illidan's main attack, the real Egg Blade drew a mysterious arc, and in half a breath's time, it cut the doppelganger and the ice barrier that was released at the critical moment in two. That mirror doppelganger of Duque let out a very realistic scream, which made even the Karazhan women's hair stand on end, and then disappeared. The apprentice left a candlestick-shaped staff that fell from mid-air. However, just as Illidan sped up and sprinted, suddenly a huge elemental palm fell from the sky. Chapter 1490. If the attack of the giant hammer was like the weight of Mount Tai, then the attack of the axe was like the splitting of heaven and earth, giving off an irresistible sense of toughness. Pure speed often came at the expense of explosiveness and destructive power. Illidan was not afraid of his opponent's speed. His body, which had been greatly strengthened by dark energy, was enough to allow him to ignore most low-intensity attacks. The chaotic aura of dark energy that lingered around him was also enough to crush any low-purity magical element. Now, the feeling that this elemental palm gave Illidan was the perfect combination of toughness and toughness. It was obviously the most rebellious magical element in the atmosphere of the Outland, but not only was it extremely tame, but it also reacted abnormally fast and violent. Dodge? How could he dodge? The elemental palm covered an area of 100 meters. If there were no obstacles, Illidan could still dodge at high speed. But when he thought of dodging, he was shocked to find that because of the sudden influx of a large amount of frost elements, the surrounding temperature not only dropped sharply, but also greatly slowed down. Raising his head suddenly, Illidan's face showed an indescribable strange expression. The green flames in his empty eye sockets, which acted as eyeballs, stared at the huge elemental hand that was rapidly expanding in his field of vision. Bang! It was a direct blow that could shatter the heavens and the earth. The entire Darkness Shrine was shocked, and even William and Shiraz, who were fighting fiercely, stopped for a while. After hitting Illidan, the violent elements poured out in all directions. However, Duque slammed Atish heavily on the ground, making an incomprehensible metallic sound. In Karazhan, Jaina looked at this scene in shock. Duque's control and shaping of the elements had completely subverted her understanding. In Jaina's concept, when the element that was shaped into the desired shape hit the target, it should have completed its task. But it was not the case for Duque. The small scattered and exploded elemental balls were forcibly stopped under Duque's will and reshaped. Jaina even saw the shape of the chainsaw that was widely used in the Alliance. All the elements flew back and frantically attacked Illidan, who was suppressed in the sunken ground and unable to move. Pierce his skin, rip his wings, destroy his muscles. As if he was lifting weights, Illidan held the giant elemental hand that was falling from the sky. He used his body that had been strengthened by his dark powers to resist the mountain-like pressure as he roared like a wounded beast. Along with the roar, his entire body was immediately bathed in the flames of evil power. The evil energy that originated from the distorted void was brutally burning everything in its path, attempting to devour all elements that were suppressing him, attacking him, and harming him. Duque frowned slightly. At first glance, Illidan's actions were as ridiculous as a snake trying to swallow an elephant. But why did the Burning Legion burn down one planet after another, killing all life and turning those planets into barren lands? Of course, some of the demons were bloodthirsty, but more importantly, the army needed to collect more dark energy in order to expand. The source of dark energy was harvesting, squeezing, corrupting, and finally transforming life and souls into dark energy. If left unchecked, once Illidan devoured more than half of the elements around him, or if Duque lost control of the elements, it would not be fun. Duque had not used the holy sword since the start of the battle. He gently shook the sword, and suddenly 4 phantom clones of Alonso's Fail bathed in holy golden light appeared around Illidan. In the blink of an eye, 4 became 16, 64, and 1024. The holy light archbishop's phantoms were densely packed, all of them coming from the same mold, filling up the entire platform. Seeing that they were surrounded by a group of Alonso's Fail, even Kaizi and Vashti were extremely surprised. Every single Alonso's was chanting a mysterious and strange prayer, their chanting echoing in the air above the platform. Light comes from darkness, and from darkness comes light. It was repeated over and over again, like an endless brainwashing cycle. Illidan knew that the easiest way to deal with this kind of chanting was to not listen, not listen, not listen. But Duque was even more shameless than him. He used the elemental hand to press down on him, so that he had no hands to cover his ears. On the other side, Tang Sanzang's chanting spiritual pollution was activated, and under the control of Alonso's who was hidden in the magic net, the phantom clones of the 12 archbishops began to activate the magic circle. This holy light circle, which was taught by Willan, could really reverse the energy that was corrupted by dark energy. It could be said to be the nemesis of dark energy. B** starred. Illidan was furious. He never thought that Duque actually had the power of the holy light. Duque laughed. What? You're only allowed to devour my elements, and I'm not allowed to convert your dark energy? You're the first, and I'm the 15th. It's very fair. Duque's fair and just look almost made Illidan's lungs explode. Don't besiege my lair if you can. Of course, Illidan could not say this out loud. He could only keep it in his chest, feeling very uncomfortable. The green dark energy was still surging around his body, and in a short span of 10 breaths, suddenly, the dark green light shone brightly. Even on the plains outside the Black Shrine, a huge green light pillar could be seen shooting up into the sky from the top of the shrine. What is this? Every single one of the allied soldiers was stunned. A terrible roar came from the top of the shrine, and everyone could not help but look up. The shrine did not stop shaking, as if something terrible was being nurtured above, and was about to wake up. A faint roar came from the end of their vision, as if an ancient giant beast was roaring. The evil aura was so thick that it was almost tangible, and it made the entire sky above the holy shrine gloomy. Dark clouds rolled in the sky, and suddenly, there was a flash, and a very unusual black lightning split the chaotic starry sky, and descended from the sky. The next moment, what was supposed to be a bright lightning bolt suddenly turned everyone's vision black. Although this period of time was very short, it naturally caused widespread panic. Holy light! What the hell happened? It was as if a portal had opened in the sky, and something seemed to pour out from it, but nothing could be seen. In everyone's vision, it was all hazy, as if all the light had been swallowed. F***ck. Illidan, what the hell did you do? When Duque saw this, there was only one thought in his mind. As expected, history was not reliable. Behind Illidan, there was a human figure formed by dozens of highly concentrated dark energy that looked like dark runes. Chapter 1491. The upper body of this thing was a few runes that were built together, and the lower body had runes that were spread out as feet. All the runes on the whole were on a flat surface. As an old player, a veteran transmigrator, and someone who had once personally gone to Shotrath City to embark on a pilgrimage but was actually collecting Naru's holy water, foot-washing water, how could he not recognize that this thing was once a Naru? But seeing his terrible color that was 100 times darker than coal ash, Duque immediately knew that this thing was a fallen Naru. According to history, there should never be a dark Naru on the list of bosses in the Black Temple. The problem was that ever since Duque transmigrated, he had never stopped causing trouble. Not to mention a dark Naru, even if Kill Jaden came, it would not be impossible. As the worst butterfly that changed history, Duque said that if he did not curse, he would have nothing to say. Kai Zi, who was next to him, finally came to a realization and said, "Ah." It's Muru. It was originally a guard of the storm, but when Illidan led the army to attack the storm for the first time a few years ago, it was taken away. Duke's teeth hurt. Duke would not feel strange if anyone said this, but since it was Kale, that's who said it, then, he really did not know what to say. The storm, to be precise, was originally an interdimensional spaceship used by the mysterious Naru to travel in the universe. 25,000 years ago, Willan, who refused to be in cahoots with Jaden, took his compatriots and fled Argus in the Naru's the storm. When the Naru came to the Outland and entered Shotrath City to participate in the battle against the demons under Illidan, only Muru was left as a member of the storm. In the original history, it was Kai Z, who became Illidan's subordinate, who led his thugs to carry out a raid on the storm, captured Muru, and sent him as a gift to the main city of the Blood Elves, Silvermoon City. During the invasion of the Scourge, many priests lost the ability to sense the holy light. They thought that the holy light had abandoned them, so they abandoned the path of the holy light and tried to enslave the holy light. Muru was imprisoned in the basement of Silvermoon City. Every Blood Knight needed to obtain the pure power of the holy light from him to enslave the holy light. Under the continuous extraction of countless people, Muru's holy light power became extremely weak. Under such circumstances, Muru was corroded by Jaden's power and degenerated into a dark Naru. Because he was a pure energy body, he could also transform into a terrifying entropy demon. It appeared in the Sunwell Highland as the fifth boss. Moreover, it was very honored and awesome to be one of the members of the horrifying boss club that Daddy Blizzard can't kill if you don't slash it. Countless elite guilds' first clear teams had been annihilated like dogs in front of Muru, who was at the level of a father. Now, the goddess of fate seemed to have played a bad joke on Duke. She actually turned the Dark Naru, who was supposed to be created by Kaizi, into a strong ally for Illidan. Duke did not know what Illidan had done to Muru, nor did he know if Jaden had left anything behind. All he knew was that things were getting out of hand. Duke suddenly realized something and turned his head a little uneasily. He opened his mouth wide and shouted at Vashj and the others. Do it! However, in the vast expanse of strange black light, the darkness seemed to devour everything. After a circle of black light suddenly burst out from Muru's body, a black hole formed above Muru's head, and then the entire world became silent. Every powerhouse saw the people around them shouting something, but they could only see their mouths open and close, but no sound came out. Sound seemed to be completely devoured. Not only sound, but also elements. The elements such as arcane, fire, and frost that Duke relied on as his greatest help were all swallowed by the black hole created by the Dark Naru. Without the arcane elements, there was naturally no magic communication. In the next moment, the five powerhouses, including Duke, were shocked because they found that even each other's vision began to blur. Human vision was because light entered the eyeball and formed nerve signals in the eyeball, which were transmitted to the brain and adjusted by the brain to form a picture. If even light was devoured, then there was no need to care about vision. Duke's face was pale. He really did not expect that Illidan could actually make a move like Muru. It was difficult to define what kind of existence a dark Muru was. Muru itself was not very scary. What was scary was that it could be used as an existence similar to a nuclear power plant and do all kinds of incredible things. Under normal circumstances, it was a sacred source of holy light. This level of consumption of holy light foot wash was definitely a drizzle, and it could make as much as it wanted. And the Dark Naru had released its stored dark power, which was now this black hole. Duke did not know how much things or energy a black hole of this level could devour. He only knew that it was definitely a lot. He had to do something, otherwise Vashj and the others would probably be wiped out in the Black Temple. At this moment, in the middle, Sal and Valen had reached the final stage of besieging the soul box. It seemed that they would be able to overturn the soul box with a little more effort. But at this time, everyone felt the black hole located at the top of the Black Temple. Valen stopped. He raised his head and looked up at the place a few floors above. He gently raised his hand, and the holy light that spread out from his body outlined the shape of the Naru at the top. Teacher, that is. Iroh the hoof said in a trembling voice. Muru, so it's here. Valen replied in a voice that seemed to be in a trance. Will the Naru also fall? That big black hole gives me a very bad feeling. Iroh's voice became more and more shaky. Yes. If left alone, the black hole may even expand infinitely, and within a few minutes, the entire Black Temple, and even the entire Draenor, will be swallowed up. What? This time, even Sal could not remain calm. He led the Horde army here, of course, for justice, to free his compatriots from the slavery of Illidan. But so many of his compatriots died with Illidan, this was definitely not what he wanted. Can't you do something? Woken shouted. Of course. Valen said firmly, and at the same time, he turned his head and shouted, the road of the Draenei against the Burning Legion, someone must continue to carry the war flag. I have led everyone for so long, and it is time to let go. I have my duty, and you have your duty. I announce that the next Archbishop will be Iroh. Ah! The hoof was stunned. What? Merid, who was fighting, suddenly realized something. The Draenei warriors guarding the outer perimeter were also unable to remain calm. What was Archbishop Valen doing, actually announcing the next Archbishop in advance? Chapter 1492. This was obviously entrusting an orphan to him. In terms of reputation and experience, how could a little Imriel be the Archbishop? Even if she was now the successor to the Archbishop, she was still far ahead of him. At that moment, some Draenei were indignant. Naru can prove Imriel's piety, and she will be the best bridge of communication between the Draenei and the higher-ups of the Alliance. Valen only had time to say this sentence before his entire body lit up. That was the purest form of holy light. In an instant, Valen's figure became extremely tall, even reaching the ceiling of the palace that was more than 20 meters tall. In a trance, everyone seemed to hear the purest and most beautiful hymn. Countless golden runes floated in the palace, each rune shining brightly. Not only did they dispel the surrounding darkness, but they also passed through the thick ceiling and reached the highest level of the Black Temple. Duque suddenly understood. He waved his hand and stopped trying to gather the elements to fight against the black hole. Instead, he went into a strategic defense mode. At the same time, he turned a large number of elements into a giant hammer and smashed through several floors of the temple with a loud bang. The dense ice element formed an absolute domain that protected Willan. The berserk wind and snow shattered all the flying rocks, but did not harm Willan in the slightest. An ice stairway appeared, leading from the middle level to the top of the Black Temple. Don't even think about coming up. Illidan was also anxious. Of course, he knew how difficult it was to deal with Old Man Eridar, who was first on Jaden's kill list. Once his holy light got close to Muru, there would probably be variables. Therefore, his choice was to take advantage of the opportunity when Duque reduced the Elemental Hand's elemental output to forcefully break free and directly attack Valen. Illidan never expected that the person who stopped him was not Duque, but Kale, that's. Kai Z snorted coldly. His entire body seemed to become one with his phoenix, turning into a giant phoenix that firmly blocked the stairway that Valen came up from. The fire elements of the phoenix were not extracted from the outside world, but from its own power. As a divine beast, when the phoenix unleashed its full power, anyone would have to avoid its sharp edge. Go away. Illidan performed a gorgeous maneuver similar to Thomas's spin. As he flew backwards, he slashed at Kale that's more than 10 times. As a fire mage, Kai Z did not have ice barrier. However, Illidan had forgotten that the prerequisite for fire element was arcane element. Kai Z's arcane magic was also very good at it. Impact barrier. This shield was a headache for many players before he transmigrated. It could absorb a huge amount of damage. Even with the sharpness of the egg knife, it was able to withstand the first wave of attacks. When the shield was about to shatter, Kai Z knew he had completed his mission. He didn't persist and instantly retreated. This time, it was Vasht's turn to shoot dozens of lightning arrows at Illidan. Ugh, Illidan was filled with hatred. Vashj, you traitor. Traitor? Ha! Vashj showed a look of concern for the mentally handicapped. Illidan protected his vitals at the critical moment and took more than a dozen arrows, all for the last chance to fight back. After adjusting his posture, Illidan still had a chance to rush over again. At this moment, there was a sudden crack under his feet. As an old rival who had loved to kill each other for 10,000 years, Illidan's heart skipped a beat. He knew what he had stepped on, Maiev Shadowsong's damn trap. Not to mention that he was slightly injured now. Even if he was at his peak, he would not be immune to Maev's trap. This was a trap specially made for a half-elf half-demon like him. The person who understood you the most in the world was definitely your enemy. Maiev had chased Illidan for so long and specially made a perfect tonic wine. It was not something that Illidan could easily break. Kneel down. Maev's cold voice sounded behind Illidan like a ghost. Sure enough, with this declaration, Illidan's knees softened and he knelt on the spot. It was the kind of extremely bitter and absolutely helpless kneel. Maev's figure, wearing a dark green cloak, suddenly appeared behind Illidan. She was like the most ruthless assassin. With her sawtooth ring that looked like the sun and moon Vajra wheel, she slashed at Illidan's back fiercely. Almost every time the wheel went down, it would take a large piece of Illidan's flesh, pieces of bat wings, or the muscles of his back. This big sister watcher, who was imprisoned by Illidan and then turned over again, mercilessly cut the flesh of her most hated prisoner. Valen originally wanted to climb up as fast as possible, but he found that Duque had thoughtfully turned the ice stairs into a hand elevator. The ice stairs automatically and quickly lifted Valen up, giving Illidan and Muru the illusion that there was a small sun slowly rising under the Black Temple. The light was like the first light of dawn, washing away the darkness. It even outlined the fine lines on the floor of the decisive battle platform that were painstakingly drawn by the Draenei craftsmen in the past. On the plains far away from the temple, the soldiers who were waiting to attack saw with their own eyes the terrifying dark ball of light that had just risen up, disintegrating like a stain washed away by the river. Bathed in the holy light that was like the rising sun, Duque couldn't help but sigh. As expected, the holy light of the little priest Alonsis Fail couldn't compare to the old priest Valen. But no matter what, it seemed that Illidan's fate of kneeling had deviated from its original trajectory, and was forcefully corrected by the hard work of the crowd. So what if you have Muru? I have Valen on my side too. The degenerate and the fraud were a perfect match. Muru, who was originally going to destroy everything with the black hole and ruin Duque's victory, suddenly burst into flames in front of everyone. A golden flame burst out from his dark chest, and soon after, golden cracks spread from the location of the flame to the entire black body. On the surface, it looked like it was going to turn the entire dark Naru into ashes, but in reality, just as the Naru of the light could turn into a dark Naru after using up all of the holy light, the dark Naru could also turn back after using up all of its shadow power. The rune-like components on Muru's body started to light up with golden halos, and this change sped up the fading of the black color on his body. In just 3 seconds, Muru, who was supposed to be a great enemy, was now glowing with golden light, and once again became a holy Naru. Praise the holy light! Alonsis Fail, who had originally used the magic net to send his clone to the scene, was happy when he suddenly realized that the holy light behind him had weakened. The first thing he saw when he turned back was Valen, who had collapsed on the ice platform, and Imriel, who had rushed to the platform without him knowing, had a blank expression on his face. Chapter 1493. At this moment, Duque's mind was in a mess. No matter how he looked at it, Valen looked like he was about to die. Duque cursed in his heart. He really wanted to yell, "Goddess of Fate, this isn't the right script." In the original history, Valen had indeed died. Why was it said that one died? Because in the version of King of Draenor, the Valen in the main timeline was fine. Instead, in the Draenor world where the brainless roar went to cause trouble in another timeline, the Valen in that branch of time died trying to save a fallen Naru. The one who died was something like a clone, Valen. And now you're telling me that the Valen in the main storyline is in trouble? Duque really couldn't figure it out now. Duke knew that she must be feeling terrible as she watched Valen fall to the ground and Imriel rush over to help him up. Valen lay on the ice, the holy light that surrounded him moments ago as bright as the rising sun was getting weaker and weaker. He didn't say a word and just smiled. Like a doting father, he stretched out his trembling hand and gently stroked Imriel's head. The holy light on his body had disappeared, and now he looked no different from an ordinary old Draenei. One couldn't tell at all that he used to be one of the 3 big shots of Eridar along with Kil, Jaden and Archimonde. Duque was a little lucky, but also a little unlucky, to witness the scene of Valen's death. At this moment, Duque suddenly understood. In fact, Valen was very old, even for the Draenei who claimed to have eternal life. In the torment of being chased 25,000 years ago, in the repeated assassination and encirclement, it was impossible for him to not be injured at all. Valen might have been unable to hold on for a long time, but with a stubborn persistence, he stubbornly stood in front of his people. He wanted to use his last breath to find a way out for his people. But at the same time, he also wanted to repay the Naru tribe for saving the Draenei. If it weren't for the Naru who used a spaceship to rescue the Draenei who refused to associate with Sargeras from planet Argus, there would probably be no Draenei left in the world, and no one would know the secret of the Burning Legion. Over the years, Muru had protected the Draenei more than once. This was an inevitable repayment. Whether it was for Muru, or for the sake of purifying the dark Naru called Kara, Willan would sacrifice his life without hesitation. Imriel looked sad, but when she realized that Wayland's death could not be reversed, she accepted it. A Draenei girl's ethereal and clear voice echoed in the sky above the black divine palace. With the help of the translator, Duque understood. The darkness will eventually pass, and all the suffering will be worth it. May our companions be as numerous as the stars in the sky, as endless as a stream. I hope that pain can sharpen our hearts, and that failure can guide us. I hope that we can meet more comrades. I hope that we can finally defeat the Burning Legion. Listening to Imriel's singing, Duque fell silent. He still did not know what to do about Willan's death, or rather, he was at a loss. Suddenly, Duque saw Willan smiling at him. The Draenei prophet raised his right index finger shakily, and used the last of his strength to shoot a beam of light at Duque's brow. The next moment, Duque, who was in Karazhan, found that his will was connected to a strange world. He immediately saw an unusual sky above his head. 4 conspicuous moons immediately attracted his attention. The air was amber, and the blue rock veins twisted and intertwined in thousands of different ways, forming strange rock structures. Duque did not see any water source, but the blue rocks were like surging waves that were frozen in an instant. The scene was like the fantasy of a talented artist. Some creatures were scattered on the surface of the rocks, or hovered in the air. They came in all shapes and sizes, and some were even difficult to describe. Bright colors, different movements, dances, games, battles. Almost none of the patterns formed had any real meaning. Duque tried his best to find an abstract meaning in all the chaos. At this time, a creature that looked like a Draenei appeared, leading many demons, and began to kill all the creatures in this world. This guy easily used green energy to flatten everything around him. After clearing up an empty space, he knelt in the ruins that he destroyed, and used his claw-shaped fingers to draw mysterious symbols with terrifying energy. When he was done, the slaughter around him stopped. At this moment, it was abnormally quiet, and the whole world was in a terrifying silence, waiting for the death knell to ring. Then, there was an explosion that destroyed the world. When Duque tried to divert his attention to try to trace this spiritual message, the transmission stopped. Wait. Willan. I haven't. When Duque came back to his senses, something even more ridiculous happened. Under everyone's gaze, Willan's translucent soul flew out of his body, and was then sucked into the soul box that was on its last breath. F***CK. What the hell? Not only did he suck Orgrim, he even sucked Willan's soul. You're just a soul box, you're going against the heavens. For a moment, Duque had the urge to destroy the soul box on the spot and save Willan's soul. But at this moment, Thrall, and the others could not stop in time, and directly destroyed the last form of the soul box, the Source of Wrath. After all, the Source of Wrath had something called Wrath Aura. Who knew how much wrath energy was stored in the soul box, and when it released this negative energy, everyone in that space would have to bear the shadow damage that would double over time. Without a transcendent existence like Duque to hold the line, this was a battle of mutual harm. Either Thrall and the others would be crushed to death by the shadow energy, or they would destroy the soul box first. The current situation was just that cruel. They did not dare to stop, and they could not stop. Looking at the soul box that sucked Willen's soul in at the last moment, and then turned into a delicate little box, everyone, be it the Alliance or the Horde, was stunned. They did not know what expression to use to face this situation. This, can I use vulgar language? Can't. Then I have nothing else to say. Duque's head was about to explode, and he did not know what to say. But before he gave a sad speech, there was one last thing to do: take care of Illidan. Chapter 1494. The Draenei were on the verge of losing their minds. Back in Argus, they had a prosperous country and kind people, but all of that had been ended by Sargeras's power. When the other two leaders had turned their people into the devil's minions for power, Velen had indeed chosen to lead his people into the light. However, this time, they had been on the run for a full 25,000 years. During this painful and unforgettable period, it was Velen who had been the spiritual pillar of the Draenei. He had constantly guided them, encouraged them, and led them out of despair and hardship. It could be said that for many Draenei who had been born on the spaceship and on the run, Velen was their only hope of survival. Now, this pillar of support for the entire race, the immortal Velen, had suddenly fallen without any warning. This caused all the Draenei to fall into grief and madness. Merrid was in a rare state of rage. He waved his holy light warhammer and rushed up the ice stairway that had carried Velen to the highest point of the platform. Suddenly, the heaven stairway broke. Rad fell from a height of more than 3 meters. Then, he saw Duque standing at the edge of the hole, and anger welled up in his heart. Duke Marcus. What are you doing? Duque turned around slightly, his eyes sharp. He glared at Merrid. Look at your holy light, and think about what Prophet Velen taught you. Fighting against evil requires a warrior with a pure heart, not an avenger. Are you worthy of Velen's teachings? Merrid's body trembled. Only then did he realize that the holy light on his body had become sparse and messy. The holy light was the purest manifestation of the will of justice in one's heart. If the motive was not pure, the holy light would naturally not be pure, and the power of smite would plummet. Merrid was speechless. On the other side, Imriel gently put down Velen's withered body that had lost its soul. She picked up her warhammer. Imriel's body lit up with a holy golden light. This was the Black Temple, the darkest and most filthy place in all of Draenor. Eridar warlocks from the twisting nether carried out all kinds of forbidden experiments, and the wails of the souls of the wronged filled the once sacred hall. Hence, the sky above the darkness shrine was always shrouded in the most evil and thick black clouds. However, at this moment, a golden dot of light grew larger and larger. From a small dot, it became a golden pillar of light that pierced through the heavens and the earth. At first, it was a little vague, but soon, everyone heard a female voice. She said, Prophet Willen's flame of life has been extinguished. The Draenei are not destroyed. The Draenei people love peace, but as long as the Burning Legion is not destroyed, the Draenei people will join hands with everyone in the Alliance to raise the Alliance's war flag high and let it fly high above this glorious world. Long live the Alliance! It was a vow to fight. Every Draenei, every allied warrior who could see Imriel, could clearly see the warhammer in Imriel's hand turning into a golden torch. The holy light was blazing, burning fiercely. Then, another pillar of light pierced through the heavens and the earth. That was the will of countless Draenei paladins and priests. Then, the pillar of light gently turned into a beautiful arc of light, merging with Imriel's pillar of light, becoming an even bigger pillar of light. Duque was a little stunned. He watched as Imriel's body was surrounded by golden flames. In an instant, a dazzling soul war flag rose from Imriel's back, and immediately turned into a pair of shining golden wings. Now, Imriel had 2 wings like her compatriots. However, the Eridar demon had ugly bat wings, and now, her hooves looked more like an angel. Alright, hooves and angels. Just the thought of it made Duque drunk. He really did not know that there was such a trick. Thinking about it, it seemed reasonable. After all, when he did not give up his moral integrity, it was because of a kind-hearted big boss who passed it on to him that he was able to avoid the crisis of his soul falling into depravity. Spiritual energy originated from the soul. Since souls could be passed on, as one of the greatest manifestations of soul energy, it was not impossible to pass on the holy light to others. Of course, the hooves were not that powerful, but the problem was that Valen had them. Looking at the system notification, Valen passed about 18,000 years worth of holy light energy to Imriel. Duque felt a headache coming on. Once upon a time, Duque was a wuxia fan. Every night, when he could not sleep, he would fantasize about some old man passing on 60 years worth of inner strength to him. Now, that old fart Valen actually gave Imriel the holy charlatan card. Now, the hooves were really going against the natural order. Looking at the shiny golden hooves that were even more holy than the golden holy Saya, Duque felt a little sad. 18,000 years worth of holy light energy. Why didn't you give me some? While Duque was complaining, he suddenly received a message from Alonso's fail. Duque, His Excellency Valen seems to have poured all the remaining holy light energy that he could not into Imriel's body into the magic weave before he died. The system notification again. Valen has injected about 8,000 years worth of holy light energy into the magic weave. That's good. Valen, you're a good friend. I'll take care of your hooves from now on. Even though he knew that Valen could not give him the hooves, that feeling was like winning the lottery or opening a treasure chest and getting a divine artifact. Her hooves fluttered her golden holy light wings unskillfully and rose into the air. Then, with a ridiculous posture similar to a standing long jump, she jumped onto the highest platform of the Black Temple. Commander Marcus, I, Imriel, as the Drenii leader candidate, request to join the crusade against Illidan. The sound of her hooves was sonorous and powerful. At this time, there was no longer any hesitation on her youthful face. Duque instinctively wanted to refuse at first. It was not that he did not think highly of Imriel's potential, but it took time and opportunity to turn potential into strength. Since ancient times, many geniuses had failed halfway and could not fulfill their potential. Valen suddenly died, and Duque did not want another Drenii leader to die. This was because the rest of the Drenii were mediocre people, and Duque did not want to see any of them die. But when he saw the girl's pleading eyes, Duque nodded. Originally, you were not qualified to participate in a battle of this level. This is your protection. But seeing that His Excellency Valen sacrificed himself for the Alliance, I agree. This time, I will hold the line. Remember, you owe me a favor. No problem, Imriel replied brightly. Her hooves sang the holy light battle song loudly, bathing her in light and charging straight towards Illidan. Chapter 1495. Just now, Duque had the time to do so many things, of course, because Illidan was too busy to leave. Maev's shadow song locked Illidan up for 10,000 years and chased him for nearly 10 years. She was able to put Illidan, who was a demigod, in such a difficult position with her strength that had yet to enter the realm of the gods. Of course, it was because her tactics and special skills were quite effective against Illidan. Illidan was already an agility hero, and Maev's agility was even higher than Illidan's. In addition, after Illidan entered the Outland, because of the semi-demonization of his body, while improving his magic ability and close combat ability, the increase in weight caused his agility to decrease slightly. The gap in speed between the two could be said to be getting bigger and bigger. Usually, Illidan was faster, but Maiev was faster. Maiev had a skill similar to Mage's, Flash. This kind of short-distance teleportation that could be used almost continuously allowed her to escape danger every time she was in danger. Illidan first fought with the 4 demigods, then slapped Duque with the elemental palm, and then spent a lot of magic to release Muru and drive him to open, black hole. Just now, because Duque had purified Muru, he suffered a mental backlash. It could be said that Illidan was already quite injured. Duque had the time to take care of the hoof because Illidan was being attacked by Maiev and Vashj. Maiev fought Illidan in close combat, and from time to time, she would use Shadow Trap to give Illidan a hard hit, or suddenly disappear, followed by a set of Backstab and Shadow Ambush. And Vashj would look for opportunities, and when she wasn't sure, she would never shoot indiscriminately. After a few rounds, the extremely smart Vashj actually faintly grasped Maiev's attack rhythm and made a few successful coordination. This made Illidan feel even more uncomfortable. Illidan suddenly saw an obviously unqualified hoof running up to him with golden light all over his body. What he felt in his heart was not happiness, but endless anger. He could see that Duque quite valued this Draenei girl. If he was a despicable person, then he would definitely think that the opportunity had come. As long as he captured this blue-skinned girl, maybe he would have a chance to escape. But he was Illidan. The arrogant and arrogant Illidan. The stubborn Illidan who always insisted on doing things his own way. He disdained taking hostages. Therefore, he felt humiliated when he saw a young female holy knight who did not even have a demigod body charging at him. Don't look down on me. Bearing the brunt of Maiev's sword formation and Vashj's triple shot, Illidan suddenly accelerated and slashed at Imriel. Warblade of Azzinoth was an extremely fast weapon to begin with. This was the first time Imriel had seen such a faintly discernible sword technique in his life. This was a world of difference from the macho man style that she had faced before, where every hit was like heaven and earth. Imriel had been tricked. The knife flew past the hoof's clumsy parry and slashed at her neck. For a moment, Vashj and Maiev, who wanted to save him, cursed in their hearts. Who knew that an accident would happen? Clang! The mighty Azzinoth's blade actually bounced off. In fact, when Illidan swung his sword at Imriel's shoulder and neck armor, he could not help but feel bitter. The crescent-shaped curved blade in his hand was a divine weapon through and through. But this slash only left a deep gash on the opponent's armor, and did not hurt her flesh at all. Illidan could not help but feel a chill in his heart. He was a demigod, and one slash could not even break the opponent's defense. This proved that his dark energy had weakened, and the opponent's power of holy light was strong. The powerful holy light created a strong armor-like effect, reducing most of the damage from the Warblade of Azzinoth. Illidan was startled, and so was Imriel. She never thought that the gap between her and her opponent was so huge. If not for the power of holy light inherited by Master Valen, she would have been decapitated by that slash just now. One would not know the power of the divine realm if one did not fight with a real powerhouse. Her strength had actually soared to the level of a hero after a few months of training. In addition to Willen's holy light, she originally thought that she would be able to fight against any demigod. However, Willen's simple oblique slash had caught her off guard. Illidan's attack was not just fast. His well-honed technique allowed him to double accelerate his sword according to his opponent's reaction. Obviously, he had guessed her next intentions and actions, so he took the initiative to attack the vital area that she had to save. If not for the holy light's stronger restraint on Illidan than expected, she would have been decapitated. At this moment, Imriel deeply understood what Master Valen meant when he said, "You are no match for the top powerhouses." For a moment, Hoof could not help but break out in a cold sweat. Of course, she was not the only one who broke out in a cold sweat. Duque, who was holding the line, also broke out in a cold sweat. He was betting that Hoof would be invincible at the last moment, and that would be victory. Who knew that Hoof would be able to withstand it? In the following battle, Imriel was simply more and more shocked. She knew very well that she could continue to fight, not because she had become stronger, but because the other two powerhouses, Maiev and Vashj, were entangled with Illidan. Even if Illidan did not have the time to attack her, the absolute difference in attack speed still caused her to be suppressed by Illidan, and she almost could not even fight back. But when Illidan's fast sword slashed her body, she could still withstand it. This was because when Illidan slashed her, he would also receive the damage from her aura of punishment. And she injected a large area of holy power into the ground, which was also hurting Illidan. On the other side, Illidan was also frustrated. In the beginning, this Draenei girl was so weak that if it was a one-on-one fight, he was confident that he could kill her in 3 moves. But as the battle went on, Imriel had become more and more mature, and her counterattack and defense had become more and more stable. In contrast, Illidan had become her sparring partner, teaching her how to kill him with real swords and spears. At this moment, Illidan finally realized that no matter how much he suppressed this girl in the duel, no matter how much advantage he had, he would never be able to win. Now he was like a trapped beast, making his last resistance and letting out a final roar. No! 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 I am Illidan Stormrage, the strongest night elf in the world. This is definitely not my ending. Illidan no longer had any hope of killing Maiev, Shadowsong or Vashj. But at least he still had a chance to drag this Draenei girl down with him. Chapter 1496. Tyrande, who was in Karazhan, felt bitter as she watched Illidan being beaten by the 3 heroines. Illidan was proud. Even though he had fallen into the path of demons, no one could take away his pride. Originally, with Illidan's demigod skills and speed, no one could stop him if he wanted to leave. Living an ignoble existence was not something that every expert could do. Illidan was still angrily attacking every enemy in his field of vision. He used his dual blades and his dark magic, but everyone could see that he was rapidly weakening. Rumbling sounds came from all over the Black Temple. At first, it was fierce, but in the last few minutes, it had calmed down. That was the end of the battle. The Allied army dragged the wounded away and left the rest to the logistics team to clean up the battlefield. They killed the demons that were not completely dead, then blew up those that needed to be blown up, and purified those that needed to be purified. Even if the Outland would one day collapse, before that day came, the Black Temple would still be returned to the Draenei and renamed to the Temple of Karabaer. Illidan was like a cornered beast. He still had too many things to do. His dreams had not been realized. His grand blueprint had only been completed a few pieces. Was he going to give up just like that? No. He was not willing. He was not willing. Even if he lost to anyone, he could not lose to Duke Marcus, the hateful human who had stolen Tyrande from him. No. Did you see that? Did you see that? I haven't lost. I haven't lost. Illidan yelled like a madman. Whether it was the 3 heroines who were besieging Illidan, or the powerful figures who were holding the line, none of them took Illidan's words to heart. They only thought that it was the last words of madness of a traitor whose soul had been corrupted by evil energy, and who was already more demon than elf. Only 2 people understood what he was saying. Tyrande, who was in Karazhan, hugged Duque tightly. She wanted to rub her perfect face into Duque's chest. Duque could clearly feel a wetness spreading from his chest. It was Tyrande's tears. Compared to Tyrande's simple sadness, Duque was actually the most conflicted. At this moment, Duque was finally certain that Illidan was just like how it was in history. He was actually playing the Infernal Affairs game. Why was it that he had been hunted by Maiev for so many years but had never fought with her? How did Illidan react when he heard that Tyrande and a small number of her sentinels had fallen into the river Aravath and been attacked by the Scourge? It was salvation. Fleeing to the Outlands was one thing, and so was the final battle with Arthas. Who would have thought that Illidan had such a magnificent demigod-level power? If he was merely controlled by dark powers, if he was merely a traitor and a loser, why did he not seek revenge on his people who used him and then abandoned him like trash? Why was he willing to join forces with his brother, who had banished him, to save Tyrande even though he was already a demon? In fact, he didn't even hate Duque, who had stolen Tyrande from him. He didn't even want to kill Duque. Yes, his goal had never changed. He loved Tyrande. As long as Tyrande was happy, he would even allow Duque to continue living in this world. He respected and loved his brother, and he also loved the people who had created his lover and brother. He had made mistakes, and he had never denied his mistakes, but his original intention had never changed. So, even at the very end, he who was eager to prove his strength, the person he wanted to fight was not Maiev who had been chasing after him for so many years, nor was it Vashti who was born as a high elf and then betrayed him. Instead, it was the hoof that had nothing to do with the elves, Iriel. Was this not a little ridiculous? But it was not ridiculous at all. At this moment, Duque heard a famous quote from his history. Betrayal? In fact, I am the one who was betrayed. I am still being hunted by people, and I am still hated by people. Now that I'm blind, I can foresee the future that others can't. Sometimes, fate must be in your own hands. No matter what you think, no matter what you do. I want to protect you. Even if he had fallen into the path of demons, he still wanted to protect his lover and people. It was really amazing. Unfortunately, he had no one to tell, and no one would know. On the scene, Illidan released his final ultimate move. Suddenly, dozens of shadow fiends the size of small hills appeared on the platform of the temple. This kind of demonic creature that lived in the shadows had very disgusting characteristics. This was a special skill that was completely different from elemental magic. It could directly attack the target's shadow on the ground, causing the shadow to bite the target. The feeling of the body forcibly entering a coma state, but one's mind was abnormally clear, anyone would feel terrible. The Kiraj twin emperors, Kale, Bats, and Vashti were all instantly imprisoned by these huge shadow fiends. With their strength, the imprisonment only lasted for a short moment, maybe a tenth of a second, or maybe even less. Even if Maiev, who had not been hit, summoned a powerful, heavenly vengeance, and did not fall into a coma state, he was still busy. Duque also looked busy. He let Alonso's doppelganger fiercely attack and clean up the surrounding shadow fiends. For Illidan's surprise attack, this was enough. Illidan's figure suddenly shrunk. He was no longer the extremely burly huge demon, but more like a former demon hunter. His figure was thin and strong. He dashed forward quickly, and because his speed was too fast, his posture was too low, giving the illusion that he was swimming close to the ground. Not good. Imriel's heart skipped a beat. She no longer had any hope of getting lucky. She took a horse stance, squatted down, and put the shield on her left arm in front of her. Her two S-shaped legs were like two compressed springs, ready to withstand the impact at any time. At the same time, she directly activated her invincibility. However, Illidan still came. The incomparably sharp, Azenatha's warblade, was close to the ground, and a strange emerald green light swept out. It looked like it was going to cut off Imriel's legs. Her hooves gritted her teeth and suddenly sat down. She wanted to smash the lower edge of the shield into the ground to block this strange blade. Who would have thought that the egg blades were only called egg blades when they were in pairs? Before the second hand that slashed over could even cut, it seemed to have triggered some strange special effect of the twin blades. The main hand's warblade of Azenath actually slashed at an even higher and more exaggerated speed. If one had to describe the speed of this move, it would be lightning. When ordinary strong people saw this green light, their heads would already be flying into the sky. Yes. It was that fast. This was the speed of a blade that had gone through millions of times of practice to reach the realm of God. She was dead. Illidan was so sure. Chapter 1497. What happened next made everyone who saw it speechless. If Illidan's slash had missed, and his all-out attack had been dodged by Imriel, he might have admitted that Imriel had grown into an unimaginably strong enemy in the short but intense battle. But, the person who changed the course of this deadly attack was Duke Marcus. This made Illidan unable to accept it. What made it even more difficult for his pride to accept was that Duque had caught his warblade of Azenath between his fingers. That's right. Duque had used his mortal body to catch Illidan's lightning-fast attack. Even though it was not as gentle as a butterfly's wing, Duque had paid a huge price. His entire left hand had exploded in order to catch this dark-powered divine weapon. His skin and muscles were torn apart, leaving only the bones and tendons of his fingers filled with arcane energy. But Illidan still felt that the time and space around him had frozen, and he greedily breathed in the hot air. How? How is this possible? Illidan panted in a barely audible voice. He tried hard to restrain his body that was about to tremble as he recalled the unbelievable scene in front of him. He had slashed as fast as he could. He was fast, but Duque was even faster. Because he was so focused on killing Imriel, he had neglected a very important detail. Duque, who was dozens of steps away, did not move. But in fact, Duque had moved. Duque had left a real illusion on the spot, and then his entire body was in a state of invisibility, followed by the fire element blazing haste and haste. When a demigod-level mage used this skill, his speed was too fast. No haste potion in the world could achieve this effect. Even with Illidan's dynamic vision, he could still see a series of afterimages left behind by Duque's speed. His strike could be said to have arrived first even though he had launched it later. Who knew that Duke's strike was even more terrifying than his? Duke had caught up to him from dozens of steps away after he had launched his strike. Duke threw away the staff in his hand and used his left hand to grab his divine weapon war blade. Initially, he thought that he could cut off Imriel's neck in Duque's hand. It turned out that he had thought too much. On the blade that he had extended, there were indeed 3 fingers that were very characteristic of the Scourge army: thumb, index, and middle fingers. Moreover, he did not grab the blade from the front, but bent his wrist and grabbed the back of the blade from the back. He did not enter the path of the blade, but caught up with the speed of Azanatha's warblade. While the main hand of Azanatha's warblade was grabbed by Duque, the other hand's blade collided with Imriel's shield. At this critical moment, Duque's right hand suddenly lit up with the brightest golden light. That was the holy light of the demon slayer in Duque's hand. At this critical moment, Duque's right hand suddenly lit up with the brightest golden light. That was the holy light of the demon slayer in Duque's hand. Looking at the rapidly magnifying golden light in his field of vision, at this moment, it was too late. Illidan used all his strength. Whether he continued to slash forward, pull back, or dodge left and right, he could not escape this attack. The slow spell that Duke had just cast made Illidan feel like he was pulling on a chain that was tied to a mountain. His extremely slow and heavy body made it impossible for him to escape. If Illidan's attack was said to be as fast as lightning, then Duque had forcefully reduced Illidan's speed to the level of a snail, and then used the speed of a tortoise to demonstrate what it meant to be relatively fast as lightning. Under normal circumstances, Illidan would not have been hit by this attack no matter what. However, Duque's attack made him feel even more pain and despair. Duque's face was emotionless. He did not show any deep hatred for the elven traitor, nor did he show any sympathy for him. He did not show any gloating over his impending fall, nor did he show any smugness of getting rid of a rival in love. Instead, Duque had a strange look that said, "I understand you, but don't blame me." Illidan was suddenly stunned. He remembered the various magical things about Duque, and the legend that Duque claimed to have peeped into the future in the River of Time. Could it be that Duque really understands me? There was no time for Illidan to think about life. The gorgeous golden sword finally pierced into Illidan's chest. Anyone could see that it was where Illidan's heart was. The sharp blade pierced through, but the pain of the sharp weapon was secondary. The burning holy power entering his chest was the biggest source of pain for the half-demon Illidan. Unable to bear it, Illidan let out the most tragic howl. Almost instinctively, Illidan made a dying counterattack against Duque. Duque barely managed to block the main attack of the twin blades of Azanoth, with the ice barrier. However, the offhand of the blade flashed past, and the entire right arm of the humanoid puppet that looked like Duque flew into the sky. Duque stumbled back. Illidan still did not admit defeat. He threw away the blade in his left hand and held the hilt with his right hand, trying to pull out the demon slayer. At this time, Imriel, who had just recovered from his daze, heard Duque's command, "Hoof, go. Smash the hilt." Heroes were heroes because they had the courage that mortals could only look up to. Even though he had just escaped from being decapitated again, Imriel's legs under his bow suddenly straightened, and his whole body shot out like a cannonball. Go to hell, so-called king of the outlands. Hoof used the shield to forcefully block Illidan's main blade, raised the warhammer high in the air, drew a beautiful golden arc in the air, and used the last bit of strength in his body to smash the bottom of the hilt. Like a hammer hitting a nail, the Demon Slayer, which was originally only halfway into Illidan's chest, finally broke through Illidan's extremely strengthened demonic body, pierced through his chest, and came out from his back. That was not all. The powerful impact nailed Illidan to the ground. Just a moment ago, Illidan did not understand why Duque was so stupid as to throw away his staff and take the blow with his own body. Now he understood, Atish was much more valuable than Duque, a human puppet. And, Atish, which was thrown out, did not go anywhere. It was now standing behind him. This divine artifact staff with rare spatial characteristics had already sealed the entire space around it. Illidan's storm rage had nowhere to run. Impossible. How could you even calculate this? Illidan's eyes were red. He roared and struggled, only to find that he was like a nailed frog. He could not move at all on the ground that had been solidified by spatial magic. The dark energy in his body flowed out of his body like a flood. Chapter 1498. Illidan was fading rapidly. At this time, the experts had already broken free from their predicament and surrounded him again. If Illidan had forcibly transformed himself back into his previous night elf form in pursuit of speed, then Illidan could no longer maintain his demon form and became like an elf. Unfortunately, the shriveled bat wings, the demonic hooves that were beginning to degenerate into toes, and the shrunken demonic horns made Illidan look a little out of place. Demon! Die! Hoof raised his warhammer high, obviously wanting to smash Illidan's head into a watermelon. Wait! Duque grabbed the Hoof's wrist with his left hand. His hooves trembled as if he had been electrocuted. Originally, a young girl being grabbed by a skeleton-like hand was definitely a horrifying and disgusting thing. Unfortunately, it was this broken palm that brought back Imriel's memories from a few seconds ago. If it wasn't for this hand, I would have been beheaded already, the dreamy-eyed girl shouted in her heart. She didn't know when her heart had started to ripple. She lowered her head and acquiesced to Duque's actions. Illidan was still struggling, but at this time, he looked extremely ridiculous. At this time, even Maiev had put away her metal sawtooth wheel, but half of her face was still covered in frost. Everyone could see that Illidan's injuries were severe, but not fatal. Commander Marcus, this traitor is too cunning. Please allow me to execute Illidan immediately. At least Maiev hadn't completely lost his mind because of hatred. He understood that the decision was now in the hands of Duque, the commander of the alliance. Duque secretly let out a sigh of relief. At least when Akama went to save Maiev, he first told her about the alliance's situation. That was the right move. Duque raised his chin slightly. If Sir Shadowsong wishes to kill a demon, I naturally have no objections. But it seemed that Illidan's storm rage was not a simple demon. After all, not a single demon in a weakened state can survive a full-powered strike from me, not even Archimonde. At this moment, everyone remembered that Duque was the hero who had personally stabbed Archimonde in the back on Mount Hyjal and killed the commander of the Burning Legion. Moreover, the holy light in front of them was real. Duke and Iroh's holy light was as powerful as a nuclear bomb to a demon's vital organs. Illidan was still alive. It could only be said that the part of him that was an elf was still the majority, and the appearance of a demon was just a facade. Hearing Duque's words, Ma Sun was speechless. At this moment, Tyrant hurriedly appeared. She borrowed Duque's strength to cast a projection. Maiev Shadowsong. Thank you for your efforts in pursuing Illidan. But Commander Marcus was right. Since Illidan's main body is still a night elf, he must receive a fair and just trial for his betrayal. Duque pursed his lips. Did you hear that? Maiev Shadowsong. Yes. Maev's hands were trembling, and she clenched her teeth tightly. Duque stepped forward and whispered to Maiev, "If a hunter no longer has prey, then a hunter is no longer a hunter. Do you understand what I mean?" This time, Maiev's whole body visibly trembled. I understand." Duque smiled. "Very good. Before Illidan's trial by the Alliance Assembly, I will leave him to you, Your Excellency Maiev Shadowsong. Don't worry." Maiev immediately displayed her profound skills as a warden. First, she took out a pair of glittering golden shackles and locked Illidan's limbs. Then, Duque used an arm made of holy elements to pull out the Demon Slayer's sword. Illidan shouted, "Kill me! Kill me! I am the king of the Outlands. I am Illidan who slaughtered countless orcs and Draenei. Kill me! A king should not suffer such humiliation." Maiev's face was cold. "You are not King. You are just a shameful traitor." As she said that, she stuffed Illidan's mouth with a piece of ragged cloth. This scene made Tyrande, who was watching from Karazhan, worried. Since Illidan had been defeated, there was no need to worry about the rest of the small fries. Duque gave a slightly strange order. "Destroy all demons, but try to capture as many of the Illidari demon hunters as possible." Hoof did not understand. Why not kill these fallen ones who have fallen into evil and use dark energy as their power? Whether they fall or not depends not on what they say or what power they use, but on what they do. If the final result proves that they are actually on the side of justice, and that they have done more than the sacrifice, then I think they can be forgiven for what they have done. When Imriel heard this, she shook her head forcefully. "I am sorry, Duque. I cannot agree with your point of view. I think we may have a very big difference of opinion." "Difference of opinion?" Duque smiled. At the same time, he turned into the dark and entered the shadow form of a priest. Duque's ability to use the conflicting powers of holy and shadow form at the same time was enough to shock Hoof. What shocked Hoof even more was what Duque said next. "What if I told you that the Alliance commander Duke Marcus standing before you not only knows how to use dark energy, but was also a high-tier Void Lord of the Twisting Nether?" You. Imriel felt that something that he had been holding on to was crumbling. "What if I told you that I used this to infiltrate the Burning Legion, and finally blew up Sardra's largest fortress in the Twisted Nether during the Ancient War, killing at least 5 billion demons?" Duque's casual words had a huge impact on Hoof's heart. Every Draenei could count their own history. They knew how many times their race had managed to avert disaster. One of the most unsolved mysteries was that in a battle 10,000 years ago, the Burning Legion had clearly gained the upper hand, but they suddenly withdrew all the demons and let go of an easy victory. This was known as the greatest mystery. Now, this eternal mystery seemed to have an answer. Imriel was completely stunned. No, not just Imriel, even Illidan, who was struggling as Maiev dragged him away from the platform of the Black Shrine, was deeply shocked. Duque's words echoed in his mind over and over again. At this moment, Illidan was finally sure that Duque, who was more like a demon than Jaden who was best at scheming, must have guessed his thoughts. Of course, he also guessed that Duque was explaining to him what kind of situation he and Tyrande were in back then. Awoo. Duque, you bastard. Illidan was very agitated as he struggled. Maev's eyes showed clear disgust, and he kicked Illidan in the head. "Shut up. You traitor." Chapter 1499. Victory. Long live. The wild dwarf drank from a bag of liquor and fired into the sky. "For our world." The heroic orc beat his chest with force. "Karabaer. We're back." The sentimental Draenei knelt in the corners of the temple and cried bitterly. Illidan's capture symbolized the end of the Allied army's Outland expedition. All that was left was to clean up the remnants of the Allied army. This was very different from the historical alliance. The original alliance would at most send some guys on horseback to the various cities and towns to declare victory. In this life, Duque was in power, and the alliance's approach was more open and transparent. During the days of the alliance's battle, almost every day, there would be thieves or hunters who were specially named by Duque as Hong Kong reporters, reporting back to the front lines of the alliance in Azeroth. From the simplest march and hard life, to the laying of railroad tracks, to the battle at Hellfire Citadel, and then to opening the passage to Shotrath City, followed by the elimination of the Fell Orcs and the battle at Moon's Shadow Valley. As long as it was a town or factory with more than 1,000 people, there would be a special mage team station to report in the form of magic images and audio. Even smaller villages would use a method similar to newspapers for publicity. Although in order to control, Duque deliberately delayed the report by 3 days. Of course, this could also be attributed to the inconvenience of communication in the Outland. But for the people of Azeroth, this was definitely something new. Just like what Duque had always emphasized to the higher-ups of the Alliance, we don't just need the soldiers to know what they're fighting for. We also need the people to know where their labor, their taxes, have gone to. Only then will our soldiers take the initiative to fight, and our people will work with their lives on the line. Duque had run the Alliance for so many years, and the Alliance was already quite used to the wartime economy. Once the war started, they would immediately implement various plans, greatly reducing the supply of luxury goods and increasing the production of military goods. Thanks to the Alliance's current strong economic and agricultural strength, there was no need for a food rationing system within the Alliance. They only prohibited merchants from selling food in bulk across borders. All merchants must have a permit and sell food and specialty fruits and vegetables on time. In almost all the military industries and logistics industries, the workers automatically and consciously worked overtime, and many workers even proposed to waive overtime pay. The people of the Alliance had no regrets, because they knew that they were contributing to this righteous war. It was because of their efforts that the frontline soldiers could eat canned food of various tastes, live in tents, and sleep in warm sleeping bags. Because there were reports from the frontline, and every piece of military equipment had a unique number. Therefore, from time to time, there would be old workers or aunties who were pleasantly surprised to discover in the news that a certain sleeping bag or a certain shovel was made by themselves. That sense of participation was incomparable to any of the previous wars. Even though they were separated by countless light years, the people in the rear still felt that their hearts were connected to the soldiers on the front lines. The logistics unit had specially vacated a special train so that the soldiers could write letters to their families every week. It was also very well received. So when news of victory came from the Outer Realm, the entire Alliance cheered. Hooray! Victory! Long live the Alliance! Long live Commander Marcus! Long live His Majesty Rin! Looking at the Alliance flags that were stuck all over the Darkness Shrine, while the people cheered, they also noticed the report that was inserted in between the victory announcements. It was the image of the evil human body modification experiment sent from the Darkness Shrine. The scene of blood flowing, the taboo scene of forced intercourse with the blood fiends, almost crossed the magic mirror and pounced on the people. Ah! Although the broadcaster, Bishop Sally Whitemane, had already solemnly reminded the people before the broadcast that the following scene was quite bloody, many people still felt extremely uncomfortable. There were number 18 prohibitions in the Alliance. Most of the current generation of Alliance youths were born during the war at the Dark Portal. In addition, the previous generation had been ravaged by war, so no one felt that there was anything wrong with the Alliance broadcasting this. At most, mothers would leave with their frightened children. Oh my God! That's too scary. Damn it, I can't imagine what would happen if millions of such monsters swarmed into Azeroth. Holy light above, I finally understand why the Alliance spends so much money every year to defend the Dark Portal and strengthen the Watchtower. The Alliance could be said to be united now, with full support. Even if Duque slapped his forehead and suddenly brainlessly held a general election or something, he would probably be elected with 99% of the votes. The end of the war was the end of a stage for the people, but for the higher-ups of the Alliance and the Horde, there were as many things to be done. The Horde was busy migrating people out of Draenor, which was about to be destroyed, and so were the Draenei. As the new leader of the Draenei, Imriel personally defeated Illidan as soon as he came to power. He helped the Draenei reclaim the Darkness Shrine and renamed it the Karabeir Shrine. This made Imriel's position suddenly stabilized. Although it was impossible to invest any manpower and resources in the Karabayr shrine because of the collapse of Draenor, it was completely different to give up on the shrine and snatch it from someone else and then tell them that they didn't want it. With Duque's reminder, the Draenei also began to prepare for the migration of the entire tribe. The initial plan was to fly the Eye to Mystic Blue Island in Azeroth. This was completely different from history. In history, it was a dumb guy who listened to an egg's order to kill the Draenei, and the Draenei were desperate, so they flew a spaceship that looked like a large escape pod to Azeroth. In this life, it was the Draenei who methodically flew the entire spaceship to Azeroth. This was a completely different concept. Duque and the higher-ups of the Alliance all believed that with the Eye, they would definitely be able to strengthen the air defense around Darnassus. After a busy day, Duque finally left Karazhan's command room and returned to his bedroom. After becoming a demigod, the physical fatigue would no longer exist. Now, it was just that there were too many things to do, and he was mentally tired. As soon as he returned to his room, Duque felt that something was wrong. The room was very dark. Someone had turned the magic lights to the darkest. Then, Duque was shocked. He was not surprised that there were maids, dragons, and maids in his room. But for this high priest who suddenly appeared, wearing a nude apron, Duque was really shocked. Damn, could it be that the little notebook I hid under the bed that I wrote when I was bored has been found? Tyron smiled charmingly and gently cupped her face with her left hand. My dear, you're back. Then do you want to eat first, or take a bath first? Or eat first, what about me? Chapter 1500. There's such a benefit. Duque's eyes lit up. When he first taught Tyrande, she refused no matter what. After 10,000 years, even though Tyrande had accumulated a lot of pressure, there was a subtle change in their standpoints. From an ill-fated relationship to a true relationship, Duque never forced Tyrande to do anything she didn't want to. In the harem, it was undeniable that Duque was very interested in Tyrande. From a priestess who was as pure as ice and jade, to slowly tormenting her. And the millions of night elves outside worshipping his woman, this feeling was as if he was scribbling on a piece of white paper, smearing it with traces that belonged only to him and then framing it up. A bunch of ignorant bystanders would worship it as a holy object. That kind of domineering monopolization and flaunting was displayed to the fullest. It was a pity that due to work, they didn't spend much time together after reuniting. In order to cherish the opportunity, Duque rarely asked Tyrande to do anything special. Usually, Tyrande would do whatever she wanted to do. Who would have thought that Tyrande would actually dig out his little notebook and become a self-taught genius? Even though Duque had purposely stayed there to see which genius would come and try it out, Duque had thought that Vashj would make the first move. He didn't expect Tyrande to be the first to taste the crab. Even though he knew why Tyrande was here, the sly Duque didn't hesitate to eat the sugar coating first. Duque smiled like a fox. Which one do you think I should choose? For once, Tyrande was immersed in her role. She had a vexed look on her face as she placed her hands above her abdomen, her fingers chattering anxiously. Oh, I just remembered that I forgot to cook dinner and run the bathwater. What should I do? Damn. This cosplay. I'll give you 101 points. I'm not afraid of you getting arrogant with an extra point. Duque immediately attacked, pulling Tyrande over with a fake version of Death's Grasp. Without saying anything, he used 5, armor penetration, Tyrande was a cloth-armored class, so her armor was low. Now, it was almost 0. Annoying. Are you really annoying or just pretending? Fake. Yo, big sister, you're courting death. Duque laughed heartily. Very good. It wasn't easy for me to cultivate a demigod body, and now I can finally put it to good use. Very quickly, Tyrande was first hit by Bewitched, then as if she had been hit by Flaming Storm, her entire body was engulfed in heat. Faced with Duque's charge, Tyrande hurriedly activated Suppression, and shouted, "You dare." At the same time, he activated Swift Sprint, and ran away. You're asking me if I'm touched? Of course I dare to move. Duque immediately used backstab on Tyrant, who had accidentally fallen to the ground in an oar's pose. The feeling of being stabbed repeatedly made Dumuk cry, which he hadn't felt for a long time. It felt so good. This was an unlimited backstab with unlimited energy. Once upon a time, Duque had envied those thieves who could hide behind the boss butt and stab it infinitely. Now, he had also become a thief. Yes, the kind that stole people's hearts. The flag duel had once again proven his martial arts skills. Once the godly sword was unleashed, the world would be shocked. Duque was satisfied. After defeating the fairy, Tyrant curled up in Duque's arms like a cat. Duque. Yes? Thank you. Duque did not say anything. He just gently stroked Tyrant's soft and bright hair. Once upon a time, Duque thought that such a head of bright green hair would look very exaggerated. But after looking at it for a long time, he felt that it was very unique and pleasing to the eye. After being together for so long, Duque naturally did not suspect that Tyrant still had feelings for Illidan. It was just a kind of attachment, a bond that could not be severed as they grew up together. Tyrant also did not doubt whether Duque would execute Illidan. She knew very well that if Duque wanted someone dead, he would not show mercy on the spot. He would not hold a trial later and make her feel uncomfortable. When Duque pierced Illidan's chest, it looked like he was aiming for his heart, but in reality, it was in the narrow space between his heart and his left lung. If it was a thicker weapon, Illidan would probably be dead. Duque's Demon Slayer sword was obviously a piercing sword. Since such a large amount of holy light directly into Illidan's heart did not kill him, Duque would not stab him again. So this time, Tyrant's apron play was to thank Duque. The next meeting of the Alliance leaders was the same. In Storm Fortress, Duque spoke passionately. I used holy light that was enough to kill Archimonde, the commander of the Burning Legion, and pierced Illidan's chest. After that, Archbishop Imriel used the same powerful holy light attack, but it did not kill Illidan. Instead, it purified the demonic blood in his body. So I do not think that Illidan is truly evil. Here, I object to Illidan Stormridge's execution. Imriel could not sit still and stood up on the spot. Wait. What about the tens of thousands of Draenei that Illidan killed during the time he informed Draenor? What about the blood debt of my people? Duque was silent for 2 seconds, then sighed. Archbishop Imriel, between countries, between races, it is not just simple hatred. In the face of a stronger enemy, we must all learn to let go of our hatred. Every leader and king present had experienced the cruelest battle at the door of darkness. Every one of us had friends or family who died at the hands of the orcs. Because of the existence of the Burning Legion, now we have no choice but to form an alliance with the orcs. This time, it was Imriel's turn to be silent, but the stubbornness in her heart made her raise her head again. What if the Draenei insist on Illidan Stormridge's death? The hall fell into a dead silence. Tyrant secretly clenched her fists. To her, in front of the High Duke, she had no position to oppose the Draenei's pursuit. At this time, Jaina spoke up. The alliance is an interracial, multi-kingdom alliance that aims to maintain peace and security in Azeroth. Our aim is to seek common ground while reserving differences. If we cannot resolve the problem through discussion, we can only vote at the throne conference. The minority must obey the majority. When the results are out, any country or race will only have 2 choices, one is to accept, and the other is to choose to leave the alliance. Also, when the Draenei first joined the alliance, they did not ask for the alliance to kill Illidan Stormrage for the Draenei. They only asked for the survival and safety of the race. The alliance has no obligation to start a war of revenge for the Draenei. After all, this was before the Draenei joined the alliance. Imriel was speechless. Whether she was a leader or a politician, she was too inexperienced. Chapter 1501. At this time, Duque rolled his eyes at Jaina. Jaina immediately knew that she had gone too far with her words. Too far. Perhaps so. But Jaina did not regret it. In Jaina's eyes, this Drenii girl did not understand politics or a country at all. Without Valen, the Drenii race would not be of much use to the Alliance. Their population was small, and their combat power was low. Their once advanced technology had all been lost and could not be used at all. Valen, the only person who knew the secrets of the Eridar clan, had been sucked into the soul box. As for the Naru, they were two different races. If they had the heart to persuade the Naru, once the Naru and Drenii were separated, the Drenii would be a burden to the Alliance. In a situation where there was no political leverage, Imriel still insisted on Illidan's death. Putting aside the relationship between Illidan and Tyrande, just the fact that Duque did not make a move meant that there must be a reason behind it. This girl who looked like Eridar was really stupid. Jaina raised her chin slightly and stuck out her nose. She did not speak. In the throne room, there was a strange silence. This time, not only Imriel, but even Merid, who was beside Imriel, felt that something was wrong. If one had to describe the atmosphere, it would be estrangement. There was an invisible barrier between Imriel, the leader of the Drenii, and the other leaders of the Alliance, but everyone could feel it. Merid, who was standing beside Imriel, used his elbow to poke Imriel's arm. Imriel finally understood. She raised her head and said in a clear voice, "I am sorry. If I do not execute Illidan, who is stained with the blood of my people, I cannot answer to my people. If there is a special reason, I am willing to listen." Imriel's attitude was neither humble nor arrogant, and she received praise from many leaders of the Alliance. At least, Master Craftsman Jurban and Kudrin looked at her with approval. "All right." Duque sighed deeply. "All leaders with voting rights, please stay. The rest, please leave for now." Everyone's heart skipped a beat. It was rare for a throne conference to take such a confidential measure. This meant that what Duque was about to say was the absolute secret of the Alliance, or even the entire Azeroth. Merid had a strange expression on his face, but when he saw that even Aurelia, Vashj, and other non-core leaders had left, he had no choice but to leave as well. Soon, there were only a dozen people left in the large hall. The atmosphere became heavy, and what made the leaders feel even more pressured was that the will of the moon goddess, Elun, had descended. Duque explained, "The following content concerns the survival of Azeroth, so please swear in the name of the moon goddess Elun that you will not reveal a single word of what you are about to hear. If you violate the oath, the mighty power of the goddess lurking in your souls will burn your souls to ashes." "I swear." The leaders swore one after another. They immediately felt a gentle yet resolute strength enter their souls. After everyone swore, Duque received Elun's message. Then, Duque raised his hand, and suddenly a huge arcane barrier rose from Duque's body. In this huge blue sphere, all elements that did not belong to Duque were forcibly expelled. Then, Duque's eyes swept across the leaders repeatedly like lightning. It was not an ordinary gaze. This divine gaze easily saw through everyone's body, from clothes to skin, to subcutaneous tissues, to internal organs, and even souls. Although Duque had left everything to the system elves, every leader felt as if they had been completely seen through. Duque's women did not feel that it was a big problem, but Imriel's cheeks suddenly turned crimson. "All right, it should be safe now. If even a true god and a demigod like this can cause problems, then there's nothing we can do about Azeroth." Duque sighed. "What I'm going to say next is that Illidan is probably the key to our destruction of the Burning Legion. This possibility is 99%. After Illidan was captured, he did not say a word. His tight-lipped attitude infuriated Maiev. He neither denied nor admitted to the accusations of his crimes. When he was scolded, he would occasionally retort to Maiev. As for his interrogation, it could be said that there was no progress at all. Just because he did not say anything, did not mean that Duque did not know. After carefully examining Illidan's body, Duque finally confirmed that Illidan, as in history, just happened to be doing his own thing when the Alliance attacked the Outland. When the Alliance had not attacked the Outland, Illidan began to secretly implement his own plan during the time when the Alliance reorganized the army. He trained a group of demon hunters and formed Illidan, waiting for the opportunity to attack the Legion's world. Among them, Illidan personally led the attack on the Dreadlord's home planet, Nazriza, and stole the Seal of Argus from the archives. This device allowed Illidan to directly enter Argus, the common home of Eridar and the Draenei, and the current headquarters of the Legion. Knowing that Nazriza was attacked, the Burning Legion immediately sent a large number of reinforcements here, and Illidan was waiting for this moment. He forcibly tore open his own portal. So the world changed, just like when Zul turned Draenor into a broken outland. The turbulent energy tore Nazriza apart, and the entire planet exploded into pieces. Because this planet was in the void, the souls of countless demon hunters were destroyed along with their bodies, and could no longer be resurrected. The Legion was furious, and in order to retaliate, they opened more portals in the Outland. Just at this time, the Alliance and the Horde sent a large-scale army to attack the Dark Portal and came to the Outland. Demon Lord Kuro planned to set a trap for the Azeroth army on the Hellfire Peninsula, surround and annihilate them. However, Illidan discovered his plan and successfully thwarted the siege. Using the Seal of Argus, Illidan projected his soul into Kill Jaden's palace, but before he could do anything, he was discovered by Kill Jaden. Just as he was about to be caught and his identity was about to be revealed, a mysterious voice sent Illidan's soul back to his own body. Illidan then met the oldest Narazila, and learned all the secrets of Sargeras, the Burning Legion, and the true darkness lurking in the void, but Illidan refused to say anything. It didn't matter. After Duque confirmed that he was one of them, he naturally had a way to help him get away with it. I once asked Lord Valen about the Eridar's home planet, Argus. I found out a lot of interesting things. For example, the defense mode there, and the quality of the earth there. Lord Valen even used telepathy to send me an image of Argus. Chapter 1502. It was Argus's information. The leaders all stared at the image of Argus, trying to imprint the scene into their minds. It was a beautiful and high-tech world full of Azeroth that all races could not understand. Of course, all of this was purely an image from 25,000 years ago when Argus had not been split. However, there were many things that would not change, such as the palaces of Archimonde and Kill Jaden. Duque pointed to a place. Everyone, please pay attention to this place. Everyone noticed that it was a brick with a psychedelic color. Then, Duque took out a small stone from his dimensional bag. The stone was very small, but under the magnification of the magnifying glass, everyone immediately recognized that this small stone was the same color as the brick of Kill Jaden's palace in the image. When we attacked the Outland, Illidan went to Kill Jaden's palace. That doesn't prove anything, right? William said neutrally. Duque did not refute. He first summarized the defense system of Kill Jaden's palace and made it into a list for everyone to see. Then, he took out a magic mirror photo. Everyone, look at the mark on Illidan's leg. This time, everyone did not speak. Duque said again, the question is, if it was a normal summon, why would it trigger the defense system of Kill Jaden's palace? Imriel clenched her fists and did not speak. Duque switched the image. It was a group of night elves with partial demonic appearances. Now, look at Illidan's Illidarii army. They call themselves demon hunters, not half-demons. We have confirmed that the method used by this group of demon hunters is to kill a powerful demon, then extract the essence of the demon's soul, seal it with a special magic, and suppress it in their own bodies. This way, they obtain the powerful strength of the demon. Please note that the souls of the demons that are treated in this way cannot return to the twisting nether and be resurrected. Every leader had the same question in their hearts. Would the Burning Legion really let Illidan do this? Please note that after I and the former Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonso's fail, the souls of the demons that they used included powerful demons like the Lesser Void Lords. When I fought in the Ancient War, there were only 1,000 demon overlords in the Twisting Nether. At this point, everyone had a more reasonable judgment in their hearts. Whether or not Illidan was against the Burning Legion was another matter. At the very least, he was definitely not loyal. Duque really wanted to say something like, "When I returned from the ancient war, I was fortunate enough to peek into Azeroth's future from the River of Time. I saw Illidan in the middle of planet Azeroth, which is now the location of the Great Maelstrom, fighting against the Burning Legion." But after some consideration, Duque said another version of the statement. "The situation in front of us now is that Illidan's strength has reached the level of an intermediate Void Lord. None of us here have the power to completely destroy his soul. If we kill him, his soul will return to the twisting nether. If he is our enemy, then he can still be resurrected by Kill Jaden. At most, his strength will be reduced a little, but he can still continue to attack Azeroth." At this point, Duque made his final statement. "On the other hand, if he is really what we think he is, then a living Illidan is more valuable than a dead one." This time, Imriel really had nothing to say, but she raised another question. "All right, I accept the reason for not killing Illidan. But how should I appease my people?" After saying that, Imriel lowered her head deeply. The Draenei girl's depression made Duque sigh. Duque said, "Next, Elun and I can focus on researching the soul casket and let Valen's soul see the light of day again. If he is a prophet, he will probably have no problem appeasing the Draenei." Before Valen fled, he had been one of the 3 leaders of Eredar for thousands of years. In addition to the time he fled, he had a reputation of 30,000 years. How could a rookie leader like Imriel compare to him? This was already the best result. Duque clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. "All right, I think there is no need for the throne to vote now." The leaders all smiled and shook their heads. At this time, Jaina spoke. "But if we use the Holy Light as a reason to pardon Illidan, it will be easily seen through by the Burning Legion, right?" Tyrande, who had been silent all this while, clenched her fists and suddenly looked up. Just as she was about to say that she would pardon Illidan in her name, Duque shook his head and smiled. "I will talk to Isra and tell him that Malfurion Stormrage pleaded with Isra to not execute Illidan. Then let Isra claim to have seen some kind of revelation." This time, everyone laughed. Only Duque would dare to use the dragon clan as a pretense. The dragon race already had a lot of power. Isra, who was in charge of the Emerald Dream, was Cenarius' adoptive mother, and was also the big boss behind the Night Elf Druid religion. With Isra's appearance, the Night Elves would not dare to say anything. Secondly, the dragon race was used to being arrogant. Who would dare to object and confront the dragon race themselves? Anyway, with Duque's good relationship with the dragon race, anyone who objected would not be able to do anything about it. Perhaps this was the privilege of the Guardians of Azeroth. When Duque said this, Tyrande immediately gave him a look of infinite gratitude. Duque knew that he would be in luck again. Under Duque's manipulation, the impact of Illidan's imprisonment was minimized to the greatest extent. Firstly, Illidan did not attack any race on the Azeroth continent, whether it was the Night Elves or humans. Secondly, the only Draenei who had a deep hatred for Illidan, as well as some Draenor orcs, were all attracted by one thing. Duque and Elun worked together to open the soul box, and as a result, a strange situation appeared. The souls of the former Great Chief Orgrim and the Draenei prophet Willan were both trapped in the soul box and could not come out. Both of them used their powerful spiritual power to control the souls in the soul box, but like conjoined twins, they could not be separated at all. Now, if the tribe wanted to communicate with Orgrim, the Great Chief had to come out. If they wanted to find Willan, then Willan had to come out. Alright, now both sides could not do without these two. Then what should they do? After some discussion, because the soul box was the Draenei's artifact, the soul box was handed over to the Alliance for safekeeping. The safekeeping place was in Theramore, supervised by Jaina. If the tribe wanted to find Orgrim, they could also come over. It was not too far away. Usually, the tribe could have a small team stationed in Theramore as warehouse managers. Chapter 1503. Illidan was not executed. Death is not the harshest punishment for an evil person. And we need to be clear, who is our real enemy? Who is the evil enemy that forced us to leave our homeland and wander the universe for 25,000 years? In the magic mirror, the Draenei saw the translucent Valen bathed in golden holy light, guiding them as usual. Countless Draenei wept bitterly, thanking the mirror image's direction. A new era has arrived. It's rare for us to meet a powerful organization that has the same beliefs as us and is willing to protect us, the Alliance. We should cherish this opportunity, recuperate, and advance hand in hand with the Alliance. Valen's position in the hearts of the Draenei was unparalleled. The reputation he had accumulated for 30,000 years was not something a new leader like Imriel could compare to. The problem was, Valen was dead, and he could not come out of the soul casket for 24 hours, because it would be an unnecessary burden on his soul. If he could not suppress the resentful souls, Valen's soul might be destroyed as well. This special situation made it impossible for Valen to continue as the leader of the Draenei. It was because of this awkward situation that Imriel's ascension to the throne was inevitable. In addition to Valen's support for his disciple, it could be said that unless Imriel caused trouble with the Alliance, her position as leader was as stable as a mountain. In Theramore's newly built soul tower, Imriel knelt on a cushion-like object in front of the soul casket. In front of her was Valen's kind figure. "Teacher, I am troubled. Please speak. Teaching and answering questions is a teacher's duty. I was busy with the survival of the race and neglected to teach you. Now is not the worst, at least I have more time to teach you and the other Karabeir apprentices." Imriel looked at the exquisite soul casket that looked like a carved box. "What I said to you, will His Excellency Orgrim hear it? He can't hear what I don't want him to hear. This is my pride." When it came to how to use soul power, Eridar was the one who was the best. "It's about the Alliance's throne meeting." Imriel fidgeted anxiously with her fingers. She may be a leader now, but in front of Valen, she would always be a student who never grew up. "What? Does the Alliance have policies that are not beneficial to the Draenei?" "No, it's not. However, Merid told me that since this was an alliance of many countries and races, the Draenei needed to find strong allies in order to increase their authority within the alliance. But no matter how hard I try, I can't make any progress." Imriel began to count with his fingers. "Dwarves and gnomes don't care about the way of the holy light. After I explained that we had lost those high-tech legacies, they only cared about the quality and quantity of our holy water." The Night Elves. It seems that Illidan, who I wanted to kill before, was the childhood friend of High Priestess Tyrande. Tyrande might hate me a little now, so she's doing everything according to the rules. But the settlement that the Alliance assigned to us, the Draenei, is near Darnassus. On the human side, His Majesty Varian Rin was lukewarm towards my visit. He then said that the Stormwind Kingdom was not responsible for the affairs of the Draenei, and refused to further communicate with me about religion and military affairs. Then there's the problem. The three Windrunner sisters of the Blood Elves, Queen Menethil of Lordaeron, Queen Berev of Alterac, and Queen Proudmoore of Kul Tiras seem to have formed an invisible alliance that I can't see, but I can feel, and they are collectively alienating the Draenei. Although they don't seem to treat the Draenei well, I feel that they are more enthusiastic about the tribe than the Draenei. This is not a good feeling. After that, Imriel continued to talk about what she had seen and heard after joining the alliance. When Imriel finished, even Valen couldn't help but ponder. The experienced Valen, of course, immediately realized that the Draenei were being subtly resisted. And everything started from Imriel's request to execute Illidan according to the wishes of the Draenei people. It didn't feel like this was the intention of Duque or Tyrande, but the resistance was real. From the current situation, it could be judged that the Alliance had the most financial resources, the Marcus family directly under Duque, the Sea Kingdom of Kul Tiras, and the Trade Alliance Alterac. There was also Lordaeron, which had better grain production. The Marcus family had already done their best to support this outland expedition. The only ones who could take care of the migration of the Draenei were the remaining three families. They had spare power, but they didn't do anything. This was definitely a big problem for the Draenei. Even if the Draenei didn't collapse immediately, they couldn't stay any longer. After defeating Illidan and his forces, Thrall had rescued his fellow orcs, so it was inevitable that the army would retreat. The remaining Draenei would definitely not be able to withstand the next attack of the Burning Legion. Other than Azeroth, which had the anti-Titan planet magic circle, the Draenei had nowhere else to go. If they were to encounter the resistance of the countries within the Alliance, it would be really bad. My child, have you noticed that the leaders of the countries and forces that are resisting you have one thing in common? Imriel suddenly realized. They are all women. Yes, it's very likely that they have a good relationship with each other. They are best friends or sisters. I suggest that you find them and sincerely apologize. Not only do you give up on pursuing Illidan, but don't mention anything about Vashj. These two did cause great suffering to the Draenei in the past, but now they are within the Alliance. Imriel nodded. In the next few days, Imriel eagerly followed Valen's instructions and went to visit. Unfortunately, it was still of no use. There was no sarcasm, but there were still soft nails sent to the Draenei girls. Imriel originally wanted to find Duque. However, Duque encountered a more critical problem. The Dark Portal, Year 24, 2nd of June, Duque received a floating bottle in Karazhan. It was very interesting. This bottle actually followed the flow of the elements in the space-time rift, entered the only gap that Duque had deliberately left, and floated into Karazhan. That was the place where the Virgin Maiden was guarding. Duque used the magician's hand to open the bottle, and suddenly a paragraph of text popped out of the bottle. It formed a line of words in the common language in the void, 10th of May, Isle of Quell, Donna's, Morningstar Village. Duque couldn't help but smile. You're finally here. Chapter 1504. The Isle of Quell, Donna's, where the Sunwell was located, was once an important place for the High Elves, but now it seemed rather bleak. This could not be helped. After the fall of the Sunstrider royal family and the Silvermoon Council, which represented the supremacy of magic, the Rangers were now in power. Whether it was Servanas who was the queen, the other three Windrunner sisters, Lor, Themar or Hadron, they were all Rangers. Although the Rangers did not go as far as to suppress the mages, it was impossible for them to be like the era of Kuel Salis, where mages were respected and all resources were given to mages. The result was that all the factions were happy, and only the mages were resentful. But what could they do? It was difficult to find a radiant moon in the country, let alone a breaking dawn. When the Allies achieved complete victory in the Outer Lands and the news that Prince Kael, that's had advanced to the Breaking Dawn rank, the mages in Sin, Dorii rejoiced and demanded the prince's return. Anyone with a discerning eye knew that anyone could return, but not the Sunstrider royal family. Otherwise, where would they put Queen Sylvanas? Kael, that could be considered reasonable and publicly stated, I am guilty. If a felony like betraying the country could be easily forgiven, then anyone could commit treason. If the country needs me, I will rush back to help in the war, but I will never return to Sin Dorii. This has nothing to do with Her Majesty the Windrunner. It is purely my personal atonement. Instead of returning, Kael, that's chose to enter the Dalajan Kirin Tor Parliament again. With the support of Duque and Jaina, he was unanimously elected as the chairman. Duque and Jaina, as well as the still missing Ronan, were nominal members to maintain their influence in the Dalajan. Apart from the mages in Sin Dorii who were disappointed, it could be said that this was the best outcome for everyone. On the 10th of May, a mysterious figure appeared unexpectedly. His appearance, his attire, and his staff that could not be more typical had evoked the dusty memories of many mages. After some hesitation, countless mages who were supposed to be on duty knelt on one knee. Your Majesty, 1, 2, 10, 100. When the entire Sunwell garrison team knelt before the mysterious man, he opened his arms, a pair of withered arms that had lost all moisture. When his hood was blown off by the wind, a wrinkled face was revealed, as well as a pair of soul flames that came from the netherworld that replaced his eyes. That's right. He was the former Sun King, Anastrian Sunstrider. My subjects. I, Anastrian, have returned. The Sun King roared into the sky. What responded to him was a tsunami of cheers. Long live our king. After appeasing the Blood Elves, no, the High Elves, who had pledged their loyalty to him again, the Sun King came to a secret chamber, and bowed to the two mysterious men who were wrapped in cloaks. "My lords, do you see that? My subjects are still loyal, the Sunwell is still under my control. Now, will the army accept my conditions?" Ha ha ha. It was a crisp and charming laugh. If the Sun King was not a forgotten person like a salted fish, perhaps even if he was still an old man thousands of years old, his heart would still be moved. The two mysterious men took off their hoods. They were the Eridar twins. The high-grade warlock Elises smiled charmingly. "Sir Kill, Jaden will not forget your contributions." Queen Sailoras continued, "He will never be stingy with rewards for those who are loyal to the army. As long as Sir Kill, Jaden successfully descends with the power of the Sunwell. He can promise on behalf of the army that Azeroth will not be completely destroyed. After getting what the army wants, you will be the king of Azeroth. If there are no problems, then let's sign this soul contract in triplicate. One for you, one for us to take back to the Twisting Nether for archiving, and one for Sir Kill, Jaden. Sign it, and you will be a member of the glorious Burning Legion. Sir Kill, Jaden promises to give you the treatment of a mid-tier Void Lord." The Gemini's voice was full of temptation. Most importantly, it was still the will of the Sun King. He hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and signed it. A few big, flamboyant words were left on the 3 soul contracts, which also symbolized the fall of his soul. He could clearly feel that as he signed his name, a part of his soul was forcibly separated and flew to the distant void, becoming Kill, Jaden's biggest bargaining chip to control him. This was the price. Anastrian's betrayal was both accidental and inevitable. It was very different from the Forsaken in history. Originally, Queen Sylvanas was the leader in history, and she even turned Lordaeron into the Undercity. In the entire Lordaeron continent, apart from Gilnis and the Eagle Nest Mountain, there were no standard alliance countries. Because of Google's instigation and the escalation of various conflicts, the Alliance and the Horde worked together more because of the situation, and not as closely as they were in this life. In the continuous local and large-scale conflicts, the Forsaken, who were originally at odds with the Alliance, were able to kill a large number of humans and obtain soldiers to replenish their numbers. The Forsaken in this life were miserable. After the Sun King refused to accept the control of the Lich King and became independent, Lordaeron was quickly destroyed by the Alliance army gathered by Duque. The Undercity was destroyed before it was officially established. It was chased across the sea miserably and hid in Winterspring. Winterspring was not a good place either. There were a large number of blue Dragonians there, as well as the two-headed chimeras, who were all extremely ferocious fellows. It was not easy for them to seek refuge with the Horde, and they originally wanted to use the banner of the Horde to check and balance the Alliance. Who knew that under Duque's suppression, the Horde was basically in existence like a lackey? And Sal saw him and his Silvermoon Council as more of a thug. The most annoying thing was that the resurrected Orgrim, who he used as a stepping stone to seek refuge with the Horde, was basically a mountain of his own among the Forsaken. He pulled away all the Death Knights and warriors of Orc origin, and they were more closely united around the Orcs instead of listening to him, the king of the Forsaken. The Horde signed an alliance with the Alliance, and the Forsaken could not find soldiers to replenish themselves. The corpses of the Alliance soldiers could not be converted, and no one in the tribe except for the Orcs cared about him, the Sun King. Even if the Orcs became Death Knights or warriors, they still did not listen to him. In fact, the entire Forsaken tribe was really driven to a dead end. After fighting Silithus, they fought the Outland. Apart from getting a bunch of equipment that was not too superb, the loss of manpower was the most painful thing for the Sun King. The Silvermoon Council, which had been a Forsaken with him, was now only a name, and there were only 2 or 3 of them left. If the proud Sun King wanted to regain his strength and become an overlord, he really could not think of a good way. In desperation, he thought of the Burning Legion. Chapter 1505. Power was one of the sweetest poisons in the world. Once you got used to the feeling of being in control of the country, you would no longer consider giving up. Having been at the peak of power for thousands of years, the taste of power had long been imprinted in the deepest part of Anastrian's soul. In order to retain power, he could rely on Arthas, who seemed stronger at the time, and the Lich King Zul behind him. When he realized that he was not used to being a servant and being treated as a slave, the stubbornness in his soul immediately flared up. Thus, during the third battle at the Dark Portal, he easily betrayed the Lich King. After joining the tribe, when his subordinates were killed again and again, and his strength was constantly reduced, he could not bear it anymore. Thus, in the Outland, he secretly found a way to kill Jaden from a captured demon. Even after relying on the Burning Legion, he was still very careful. The Legion was not invincible. The tragedy of the ancient war and the Archeron's bones had repeatedly proven this. In the deal with the Eridar twins, he repeatedly emphasized that only when Jaden completely descended to Azeroth would he raise the flag of rebellion in the tribe and respond to the Burning Legion. Before that, he would still be the most loyal servant of the great chief, Sal. The Eridar twins laughed coldly. This laughter made Anastrian's hair stand on end. In his heart, this was the Legion's distrust of swaying people who wanted to gain benefits from both sides. Recently, the Legion has rarely been able to enter the core of the Alliance and the Horde to obtain the latest and most detailed information. If I stay in the tribe, it will be beneficial for Sir Jaden to descend. Aless laughed. Ha! Let's put it that way for now. Salola said with a smile, no matter what, your contribution will not be small. The Eridar twins disappeared. The ones who were here before were only their soul projections. Feeling lost, the Sun King slowly walked out of the secret chamber and looked up at the palace that once belonged to him, the beams painted bright red, the brilliant ceiling made of marble and inlaid with gold leaf, the magic stone chandelier connected to the well of the sun that was always lit. The images went from blurry to clear until every detail was reflected in the eyes constructed by the fire of the soul. It's mine. It's all mine. It belongs to me. I want them all back. The Sun King opened his arms and let out a roar that shook half of the palace. The mages loyal to him knelt on the ground and chanted the holy name of the Sunstrider. Soon, the Sun King came to a secret room that only he knew. As soon as he stepped into the room filled with cobwebs, the dusty floor lit up with mysterious magic runes. All of the runes formed a huge circular magic array that emitted a blazing red light. The light flickered as if it was welcoming the arrival of the true master of the Sunwell. Begin. The Sun King seemed to be talking to someone, but he also seemed to be talking to himself. After saying that, he began to chant an incantation. This was a secret valve that controlled the water in the Sunwell. Even Kael, didn't know about this place, let alone the current queen of Sin, Dorii, Sylvanas. He looked in the direction of Silvermoon City with extreme disgust. Even though he was looking at a pitch-black wall, he felt that his gaze had transcended space and landed on the usurper, nailing her to the throne that should have belonged to him. He. Accompanied by the Sun King's cold laughter and the powerful energy of the Sunwell, more spatial holes appeared on the already slightly broken planet Azeroth's protective circle. These holes could not allow a Lord-level demon to pass through, but it was enough for the Eridar warlocks to complete their descent. Green teleportation doors opened in the palace corridors and halls of the Sunwell. Facing the Eridar demons that walked out of the teleportation doors, the High Elves were like their High Elves from 10,000 years ago. They knelt before these ugly and evil creatures that prided themselves on their nobility. Ha 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 ha. The Eridar warlocks began to cast spells, injecting evil energy into the bodies of these self-indulgent High Elves, rotting their souls and bodies. Every High Elf's body changed. A pair of black goat's horns grew out of their foreheads. Sharp, vampire-like canine teeth grew out. Their originally fair skin turned the color of wheat, and there were many evil runes on their skin. A pair of short black wings grew out of their shoulder blades, making them look a little out of place. There was also the green evil light that flowed from their wrists and ankles. They had turned from pure elves into a demon subspecies, Shadow Blade Elves. But they did not regret it, because they felt an unprecedented surge of magic flowing in their bodies. For a moment, fanatical laughter and praises came from every palace in the Sunwell Highlands. All right, I should go. I'll leave the rest to you. After the Sun King arranged everything, he turned around and opened a teleportation door to leave. Unfortunately, those who saw him off were not only his subordinates, but also Duque. In Karazhan, Duque hugged Servanas affectionately. Beside him lay Aurelia and Sasha. When they saw this scene, their bodies trembled in anger. Anastrian! You bastard! It's not enough to betray all of Quell, Dorii. You want to betray Sin, Dorii as well? If not for Duque holding her, Queen Sylvanas would have probably jumped up on the spot and killed her way to the Sun Well, stopping the escaping Sun King and beating him up first. Duque smiled, and there was a hint of nonchalance in his smile. The reason why conspiracies are scary is that before they start, everything is unknown. If it's a known conspiracy, then it's just a clown dancing in our palm. We can crush it easily. Aurelia was convinced. No wonder you've been sneaking into the Sunwell Highlands in all sorts of ways besides staying in Karazhan. So this is what you're up to. Sasha rubbed her eyebrows. You're amazing. There's even a live broadcast. Queen Sylvanas suddenly rejoiced. If not for Duque's precautions, once Jaden successfully descended, New Silvermoon would be the first to suffer. This brand new city built on the edge of the ruins of the old city had been restored to its former glory after 9 years with the full support of the Alliance, making it the new pride of Sin, Dorii. The Windrunner sisters did not want this new city to be destroyed. That would hurt the morale of the citizens. Chapter 1506. Queen Sylvanas kissed Duque, then said in a serious tone, "We're waiting for Jaden to descend halfway, then we'll stop him. After dealing with Jaden, we'll go and kill Anastrian as well. He's already defected to the Burning Legion, so Thrall has no reason to protect him this time, right?" Duque smiled and shook his head. "We're not going to deal with Anastrian this time. The Forsaken mages are still useful to the Horde. Even if Thrall agrees to expel the Forsaken from the Horde, there's no point in him secretly protecting the bones. After all, we can't use the Holy Light to search every corner of Kalimdor." Sylvanas was indeed the Queen of Darkness who was very good at conspiracies. She immediately understood the crux of the matter. For example, even if Illidan committed all sorts of evil outside, as long as he did not directly harm his own country or people, there would be no absolute hatred and conflict of interest between the two sides. You want to keep Anastrian alive and let him find a chance to bite the Horde? Yes. It'll be difficult. You know, there are a few Dreadlords in the Forsaken faction who betrayed the Burning Legion. If things go wrong and Anastrian pushes the blame to his subordinates, then there's no way he'll be able to get rid of him. As long as he's still useful to the Horde, Thrall won't easily touch him. A confident smile appeared on Duke's face. Don't worry, I have absolute evidence. A moment ago, a soul contract had been placed on the desk next to Duque's. The Sun King would never have dreamed that the Eridar Gemini were actually Duque's people. There was no such thing as a soul contract in triplicate. Jaden only cared about receiving a soul contract and controlling the Sun King's soul fragment. He didn't care about anything else. As long as he could control Anastrian, that was enough for him. He would never have thought that the Eridar twins, who were trembling in fear and looked like they were about to piss their pants, had already planned to betray him. They had even purposely left an extra soul contract so that Duque could sell the Sun King for a good price in the future. If Jaden knew that the Eridar Gemini, who had been reduced to running errands and serving as cannon fodder, had long since sided with Duque, it was hard to imagine what kind of expression he would have. The 3 Windrunner sisters didn't know what Duque had mastered, but they had been Duque's women for a long time. As long as Duque said that he had a certain someone, then it was a sure thing. Duque didn't say anything, so they didn't ask. They just waited for the show to happen. All right, now it's your turn. Duque gave Queen Sylvie a gentle hug. I know. Queen Sylvie's eyes gradually became sharp. When it came to the fate and future of her compatriots, she transformed into a decisive Queen of Darkness. A moment later, all the Alliance leaders received an urgent encrypted message from Queen Sylvanas in Silvery Moon City. It's an emergency. As Commander Marcus predicted, the Burning Legion has set their sights on the Sun Well. A quarter of an hour ago, a large number of Eridar warlocks infiltrated the Sun Well highlands and instigated the Sin Dorii mages, who thirsted for power, to rebel. Now, they have all become half-elf, half-demon monsters. What appeared in the magic projection was the newly born Shadow Blade Elves. Hiss. All the leaders gasped. Magni let out a long sigh. Duque, your prediction was indeed correct. No wonder you started making arrangements half a year ago. The Burning Legion making use of the Sun Well to cause trouble wasn't some monstrous prophecy. It could be said that this was something that all wise commanders could predict. The only difference was when and how large the scale. There were only two ways for the Burning Legion to invade Azeroth on a large scale. One was to forcefully kill the greatly strengthened Pentashade dragons in the Void battlefield against the powerful planet's anti-Titan magic formation. The other was to find a way to borrow the powerful energy of Azeroth to forcefully tear apart the protective magic formation and allow the commander-level demons to descend. The Burning Legion had spent more than 10,000 years proving that the first method wouldn't work. As long as 3 or more of the Pentashade dragons were still alive, they couldn't even think about it. The second method was to use the Well of Eternity during the ancient war 10,000 years ago. Back then, the Well of Eternity was so powerful that it almost transported Sargeras in his complete form over. In the 15 years at the Dark Portal, the Dalajan, who had gathered a large amount of magic, had played this role. Unfortunately, the Dalajan didn't have a large source of magic. After using up the magic that had been accumulated for thousands of years, the Dalajan didn't have enough magic for Kill Jaden to descend. Therefore, there were only two choices left, either the Dark Portal or the new Well of the Sun. Compared to the Dark Portal, which was heavily guarded by the Alliance, the Well of the Sun, which had been put on hold and banned due to the loss of power in the magic faction, was easier to deal with. Unfortunately, Kill Jaden's seemingly perfect plot was destined to be futile. Duque winked at the leaders. All right, leaders who agree to carry out the Normandy invasion, please raise your hand. The result was, of course, unanimous. Imriel looked at Duque with misty eyes. She didn't know what the Normandy invasion was. She only knew that after Sargeras and Archimonde, the last leader of the Burning Legion was about to be toyed to death by Duque. She really couldn't describe how she felt. Would Kill Jaden, who had hunted down the Draenei for 25,000 years, who was known for his cunning and treacherous ways, who made all intelligent beings in the universe tremble and cry in fear, really fall for a trap so easily? If it was someone else, she would definitely scoff at it. However, when she personally climbed the highest peak of Mount Shanger under Tyron's lead and admired Archimonde's huge remains, only bones were left. When she saw the small wound on his spine, she felt an unprecedented admiration for Duque. It was admiration for the person who saved her people, and also the hero who killed the Draenei's enemy. Even if her rationality kept telling her not to have too much hope for the demon commander, her budding heart always hoped for the success of Duque's operation this time. As Imriel waited anxiously, it had been almost a month since the birth of the Shadowblade Elves. During this period, the mages who were spies reported that everything was fine in their daily reports. On the other hand, Sylvanas, the Azeroth Academy Award winner of the Best Actress Award, wanted nothing more than to hang these scumbags to death, but she still pretended to be in the dark. She even found an excuse to reduce the benefits of the mages. However, this actually made the mages faction feel more at ease. It was now the 5th of June. Suddenly, on this day, the entire Isle of Quell Danas shook violently. Chapter 1507. Roar. A strange sound rang out on the Isle of Quell Danas. The piercing howl quickly formed an intuitive concept in the mind of Sylvanas, who was in the palace of New Silvery Moon. If it was like the sharp sound of an arrow being shot, then the length of this arrow was probably the distance between Silvery Moon City and the middle of the Long Song Forest. The violent howl swept across the ruins of the old Silvery Moon City from west to east, and rushed towards New Silvery Moon City. Even though Sylvanas was mentally prepared, he still felt the back of his head go numb. He instinctively pulled Lilith forward, and the two of them rolled behind the sturdy desk. This was her desk, and it was also a piece of armor made by Duque, with strong magic resistance. Almost as soon as the sonic boom rang out, the magic circle of this large armor was activated. Silvery Moon City's magic shield was activated along with it. The ignorant people looked at the sudden appearance of a bluish-purple magic shield in the sky above their city, and were at a loss of what to do. A second later, the terrifying sonic boom swept through the western wall of Silvery Moon City, and all the windows on the high walls. The magic shield could block direct attacks, even airwaves, but it could not stop the transmission of sound. The Blood Elves only heard a hum, and the sound seemed to be forced into their brains, causing their eardrums to swell. It was like the humming caused by the imbalance of internal and external air pressure. Even after a few seconds, everyone could still feel the continuous humming in their heads, and it took a long time for them to recover their hearing. The brand new city wall let out a wailing sound, and dust fell in the rustling sound. Although the activation of the magic circle had avoided the direct hit of the sound wave, every window on all the towers above the city wall was creaking. This scene was like the end of the world. On the coast of New Silvery Moon City near the North Sea, a guard on a sentry tower immediately noticed that something was wrong. "Look, what's that?" He pointed to the west. On the Isle of Quell, Donna's. It set off clouds of horrifying green mist. As the green fog that symbolized the dark powers dissipated, a monster that was at least 4 or 5 stories tall appeared from within the city wall of the Sunwell Heights. He twisted his head that seemed to have no neck and looked around slowly. It stood on the high ground, and the leaves around it had begun to wither. The layered canopy was like some kind of ornament on its waist, and this behemoth-like monster seemed to have grown out of the highlands of the Sunwell, like a hill on the highlands. This was simply too terrifying. Alarm! Ring the alarm. Let's see if the magical communication is still working. Contact Silvermoon City immediately and inform Her Majesty the Queen. You split into 3 groups and ride chocobos back to Silvery Moon City to report. Coincidentally, one of the powerhouses of Silvermoon City, Haduran Brightwing, had just arrived while patrolling the city's defenses. At first, he did not understand why the Queen had secretly emphasized that he should stay in Silvery Moon City and not patrol Long Song Forest. Now he seemed to understand something. The Elven Rangers had always been pragmatic, and compared to the mage faction that emphasized elegance and composure, the Rangers were more capable. It took only 5 minutes from the discovery of a terrifying monster that looked like the Lord of the Abyss to the Queen's throne. Logically speaking, such a big thing would take at least a few hours to be reported to the Queen. Originally, Queen Sylvanas wanted to be the Queen of Shadows, but this was her kingdom, and she was surrounded by her compatriots and people. This time, there was no need to act. Queen Sylvanas directly activated the highest level of magical communication in the Alliance. Emergency report. Traces of the Lord of the Abyss have been found on the Isle of Quell, Donna's in the Kingdom of Sin, Dorii. Since that is where the Sunwell is, I highly suspect that the Burning Legion will use the Sunwell to invade Azeroth. Requesting emergency assistance from the Alliance. This magical communication, to outsiders, was like poking a hornet's nest. For a moment, the Alliance was in an uproar, and the Horde was shocked. Still in his pajamas, the drama queen Duque made the decision on the spot for the Alliance to enter the highest state of war. In less than 5 minutes, the highest level of red alert sounded in all the main cities and strongholds of the Alliance. Woo woo woo, the ear-piercing alarm echoed in the ears of 90% of the Alliance's soldiers and civilians. The next moment, all the magical communication mirrors set up in the main cities and large villages switched to Sally Whitemane, who had recently taken on a part-time job as a broadcaster. Whether it was the mirror or the magic broadcasting system, Sally's crisp and sonorous voice rang out. This is a red alert announcement. 20 minutes ago, a large-scale invasion of the Burning Legion was discovered on the Isle of Quell, Donna's in the Kingdom of Sin, Dorii. Queen Sylvanas Windrunner has requested emergency assistance from the Alliance. Now, all Alliance soldiers immediately cancel their leave and report to the nearest command post. All militias immediately gather at the various military camps. After Duque came to power, he had always emphasized emergency response. Before the first year of the Dark Portal, according to this logistic system that was close to the European Middle Ages, it was already a miracle to be able to mobilize an army of 50,000 people in a month. Now, the Alliance could mobilize an army of 1 million in 5 days. In the East Valley lumberyard in the Elven Forest, hearing the alarm, an old man decisively cut the rope on his carriage. Logs immediately rolled to the side of the road. The reason he did this was because he saw a few disheveled Alliance soldiers carrying their equipment and running in the direction of the town. With one look, he could tell that they were soldiers on leave. "There's no time to explain, get on the carriage." The uncle patted the side of his carriage. "Thank you, Uncle Doolittle." "No need to thank me. You are also protecting our world." In the steam train stations of various sizes, after hearing the alarm, the workers immediately stopped loading the goods. They pushed boxes of goods that had nothing to do with military supplies off the carriage and threw them to the side of the railway. "Hurry, hurry. Carriage 1 to 6, load all of them with wheat. Carriage 7 to 12 for the assembled soldiers." As soon as the stationmaster finished speaking, a thin stream of silver flowed into his field of vision. It was the Alliance soldiers, some sitting in carriages, some running. Although they were a little disheveled, it did not hinder them from converging on the railway like rivers flowing into the sea. At this moment, the Alliance, the war machine that had never completely stopped, was once again in full force. Woo woo woo, hearing the alarm, from Stormwind City to the Iron Furnace Fort, to the South Sea City-State, to New Lordaeron, to Kultiras, diesel tanks that had been well repaired lifted the canvas covering them. With ear-piercing roars, they drove out of the warehouse built in the cave. The warships that had long been filled with ammunition and fuel whistled, calling the sailors who quickly ran to the ship. Chapter 1508. In the sky above the blasted land, Naxxramas, the floating fortress that the soldiers in the watchtower were used to and mocked as the second moon, rumbled. Usually, if soldiers wanted to go to Naxxramas, they would have to take the airship first and then transport it up one by one. Naxxramas looked like it couldn't wait any longer. It began to slowly land at the designated docking point that was specially opened for it. In order to prevent possible enemy invasion and infiltration, Naxxramas basically stayed in the air. Now that it had taken the initiative to come down and take over the soldiers on rotation, everyone knew how urgent the situation was. In the command post of the watchtower, Boulang Bronzebeard patted Reginald Windsor's shoulder and looked at the powerhouses beside him. "I'll leave this place to you. Don't worry." Reginald smiled. "No one can pass through here." Gavin Rad smiled. Cale, who was standing next to him, also smiled. In history, the Overwatch fortress was guarded by Archmage Sastranan and General Lodinson, 2 unknown fellows. Now, they were not even ranked in the watchtower. Because the Alliance had completely withdrawn from the Outlands, Daneth Trollbane had been sent back by Duque to restore his country. There was no longer a need to go to the Outlands. The watchtower had returned to its function as a gateway to Azeroth, so strengthening its defense was necessary. The latest change was that Reginald was appointed as the Commander-in-Chief of the watchtower. Under him was the Commander-in-Chief of the Infantry, Gavin Rad, the Commander-in-Chief of the Cavalry, Haas, the Commander-in-Chief of the Mages, Cale, and the Commander-in-Chief of the Artillery, Boulang. As for Naxxramas, Tyrion was now in charge, Cudrin Wildhammer was in charge of the Air Force, and Solarian was in charge of the Mages. Without the losses in history, the Alliance could be said to be full of talents. If the missing Ronin and the others could return, that would be even better. Although Cale, held the title of Speaker of Kirin Tor, the kind-hearted former prince seemed to have no interest in politics. After washing away the stigma of being a traitor, he preferred to be a dedicated character. Especially when it came to the issue of the Well of the Sun this time, he simply avoided arousing suspicion and did not even return to the Dalajan. Instead, he brought the group of 4 who jumped back to be loyal subjects to guard the borders of planet Azeroth. Although Naxxramas had the teleportation function, in order to avoid any accidents and not to alert the enemy at the beginning, it had not been moved. If he rushed there at full speed, he could reach Silvermoon City within a week. Of course, before that, the Alliance's fleet would arrive first. The port of Kul Tiras was in an uproar. Aegwyn, dressed as a high elf, tossed the report aside and chuckled, "My queen, who are you trying to fool? You guys are really secretive this time, but I've already arranged everything." Gianna was silent at first. The Alliance didn't have a drill earlier or later. It just so happens that in June, they're going to drill for a beach landing and artillery cover. Or a live-fire exercise on the northern coast of Rotterdam. Don't tease me. Starting from May, all the bombs that were shipped to the ship were high-explosive bombs. Also, do you really think I can't receive reports from Vasht's Naga troops? Jaina could only smile bitterly. Can you tell? Nonsense. Of course, I also know that the throne must have asked for confidentiality, so I won't say anything. Aegwyn was a little unhappy, but she quickly relaxed. That's good too. With such an excellent heir, us guardians of the previous generation can also be more comfortable. Hee hee. My son has good foresight and has chosen an excellent successor. Now he can enjoy his retirement in peace. Gianna sighed. For so many years, Medivh had been living in self-blame. He always thought that if he had discovered Sargeras's soul in his body earlier, or if his will had been stronger, he might have been able to suppress Sargeras and avoid opening the dark portal, causing a series of disasters now. He did not think that Sargeras had been causing trouble since he was still in his mother's womb. Would he really let him grow into a strong-willed man like Uther? But let bygones be bygones. Clearly, her man Duque had done a better job than Medivh and Aegwyn in becoming a guardian. At that moment, Duque had already taken Tyrion and Tyron to Silvery Moon through the portal. With Atish, a godly item with spatial properties, Duke wasn't afraid of being intercepted when he teleported in Azeroth. Sylvanas breathed a sigh of relief when she saw Duque's arrival. After Duque went out for a walk and reassured the Sin Dorii, Queen Sylvanas nervously informed him of the latest situation. Kill Jaden has not arrived yet, but the situation at the Sunwell Highlands is not looking good. In addition to the Lord of the Abyss, we also found a blue dragon. With that, Queen Sylvanas sent the occasional surveillance images to the magic mirror. Duque slapped his forehead. How could I have forgotten about this guy? It was a beautiful adult blue dragon. His huge body faintly showed incomparably beautiful lines in the misty dark energy weapon that intersected light and darkness. It was a tension filled with a sense of power. The scales, which were as detailed as a work of art, were a beautiful sky blue. However, there were some places, such as the crown, that were faintly green. Of course, Duque recognized him. Wasn't he Kalegos, who later became the Blue Dragon King in history? Guys with a little green on their heads often did not have a good ending, such as Illidan, who had pretended to join the army. A prairie on his head, that was a symbol of dark energy corruption. Oh no, oh no. Sickness must be treated, don't F** King drag it out. Ahem, that was generally true, but Kalegos, Duque did not know what to say about him. Before transmigrating, the official introduction that Duke saw said, Kalegos is a member of the Blue Dragon Legion. As one of the few dragon eggs that survived the destruction of the Wings of Death, he is a new generation of dragons born. He is powerful and wise, and he can quickly take charge. Sounds awesome, right? But look at his original record in history. He was shot down from the sky in Kuel Salis by the dwarves with muskets. He was controlled by a demon in the Sunwell. He was chased by the black dragons in the Cataclysm and went to seek refuge with the goblins as Hara. In the end, he found the old blue dragon Azuragos, who liked the soul healer, and destroyed the group of black dragons. He was beaten up by the Twilight Dragon, and the orange staff girl who supported him died. He was shot down by the Horde's airship during the Battle of the Amor. Deathwing instantly destroyed the Horde's airship. It was no wonder that Duque had completely forgotten about this guy. Kalegos was so weak that he could scratch his feet. He was a disgrace to the dragons.